everybody. So, the GM decided to use hero points in his 5e campaign and didn't really think about the ramifications of that system. So when a player just sort of decided that there was a trapdoor in the dungeon that would lead them to a deeper part of the dungeon, the DM just kind of had to go with it because that's how those work, and they were pretty poorly thought out. And he thought, only I had read the improvised dungeon rules in Fabula Ultima, I wouldn't be in this position right now. Too late now.
I don't think that is how those work in the DMG.
They do, and they used to. They literally was just like, you can just say a trapdoor opens to a deeper part of the dungeon.
This sounds like Cap. I don't remember this.
I derailing 5 seconds in, baby. Don't you worry. I'm gonna look it up right the fuck now.
I mean, I'm gonna try and look.
This is Josh's fault.
It is. Yeah, that's fair.
Let's see.
I mean, it's been a minute since I don't even remember where the fuck this hero point shit is, because God, the organization for the old DMG was
it's bad.
Truly something. Treasure between
Dungeon Master's Workshop.
Isn't the work yet?
Here we go. Hero points.
Oh, I found it. Blah blah blah. Option blah blah. For each time a character gains a level, new blah blah. Okay, Player can spend a hero point whenever he or she makes an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. The player can spend a hero point after roll is made before the result. Spending a hero point allows the player to roll a d6 and add it to the d20. In addition, whenever a character fails a death saving throw.
No, that's cap. That's absolute fucking cap. No, because it had other things it did.
I don't see anything else. Oh, were you talking about plot points?
Hold on.
Plot points allow players to change the course of the campaign or introduce plot complications, alter the world, and assume the role of the DM, or blah, blah, blah. Each player starts with one plot point. During a session, they can spend the point for one effect. The effect depends on your group's approach to this rule. 3 options here are presented. What a twist, the plot thickens, and the gods must be crazy. What a twist. The player who spends a plot point gets to add some element into the setting or situation that the group must accept as true. For example, a player can spend a plot point and state that his or her character has found a secret door, an NPC appears, or a monster turns out to be a long-lost ally, polymorphed into a horrible beast. The player who wants to spend a plot point in this way should take a minute to discuss his or her idea with everyone else at the table and get feedback before setting on the... Yeah, okay. You're thinking of the plot points. Not the same thing as hero points.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, these are one of those things that they threw in there because they wrote a lot of the stuff in the toolbox in the workshop section of the old DMG was ideas they had that didn't get play tested, so they threw them in there optionally. That's why a lot of them are kind of wacky, much like plot points. These are, I mean, has found a secret door. The fact that you could just declare a secret door is kind of insane, because you as the GM go, okay, there's a room with nothing in it. Like, how do you what do you do there?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
What do you do?
It's a little nuts.
If a player, okay, whenever a player, or another option, whenever a player spends a plot point, the player to his or her right must add a complication to the scene. For example, if a player who spends a plot point decides that her character has found a secret door, the player to the right must state that opening the door triggers a magical trap that teleports the party to another part of the dungeon. And then the gods must be crazy. With this approach, there is no permanent DM. Everyone makes a character and one person starts as the DM and runs the game. That person's character becomes an NPC who can tag along with the group. Or, wait, what? Everyone makes a character and one person starts as the DM and runs the game as normal. Anytime a player can spend a plot point to become the DM, the player's character becomes an NPC and play continues. It's probably not a good idea to swap roles in the middle of combat, but it can happen if your group allows for the time for the new DM to settle into his or her role and pick up where the previous DM left off. Using plot points in this way can make for an exciting campaign as each new DM stares at... I mean, I guess if you just want to Mad Lib your game for a little bit, I don't know that I could do that for any extended period of time, but it'd be funny for like an adventure, I guess.
Yes, I mean, that is the most accurate way of putting it. You are just straight up Mad Libbing this shit.
Yes. Side note, little side tangent. Not that this is an episode about D&D. Hello, everyone. We're talking about D&D, I guess, right now. So you know how feats were an optional rule in the player's handbook?
Yes.
Do you know why they're an optional rule originally?
I do not.
So, as you know, the 5th edition original books were made with not a lot of money and not a lot of time and not a lot of designers either, right? So they were getting towards the end of things and they created feats and they didn't have enough time to finish playtesting the feats. So they just made them an optional rule because they weren't properly playtested. Which is why some feats are way more powerful than other feats. Because they didn't playtest them.
Makes sense.
Yep. That's why they were optional. Because they were like, well, we didn't finish this, but people might want it, so we're going to put it in here and say it's not technically part of the game. I thought that was funny. That's a thing we learned more recently, if correctly. But yeah, that's a thing. Do with that information what you will.
It's very interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. Anyway, hello everyone. We're not talking about D&D today.
We are not. No.
Despite what that may have made you think.
Yes. Because Josh derailed again.
I mean, I don't know that was entirely my fault, but okay.
We're going to have to agree to disagree. Anyway.
I think we could share the blame.
I don't want to.
Fair enough.
So, with that in mind, we are returning with our much promised part 2 of the Fabula Ultima tabletop shoutout, where we're going to cover the GM.
Like I said, much promise, like we've been hyping this up for something for weeks.
I mean, we were away for a week, so it's the best we got.
Yes, well, you know, you contracted the
and now so did you.
And then, well, no, you gave it to me.
Maybe.
You gave it. Shh.
Maybe just a little bit.
Yes, the much hyped up second half.
Yep. And, you know, I mean, the peak train just keeps on rolling because even the GM stuff in this game is fucking sick. It's great.
Yeah, the GM section I find to be the GM section. We're gonna try that sentence again. The GM section made me want to run the game. Is what I was getting at there.
Yeah, I mean,
he's good.
He's good. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think tell people what they need to know, and then we can just kick it right off.
If you eat your vegetables, your eyesight will be better. That's good info.
Anything else? Anything more relevant to the topic at hand?
If you hit follow or subscribe on your current podcast platform of choice, it will add a year to your life. For legal reasons, that's not a promise.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's not Red Bull ourselves into another mess.
Red Bull?
Did you not hear that Red Bull got sued because someone drank it and then jumped off a building, and then they sued Red Bull for being like, it didn't actually give me wings?
No? There's no way they got away with that suing though, right? Like,
I don't know. Hold on.
No, do not look into this right now. This is not important. This is really not important right now.
Yeah, American plaintiff Benjamin Carruthers filed a lawsuit against Red Bull stating that the slogan was misleading. To clarify, Benjamin did not actually expect to grow wings. He knew that the slogan was not literal and meant to convey the strong, energizing effect of the drink.
So he knew it wasn't literal, but tried to sue them over it anyway?
Yes.
I have so many questions.
Yep.
Okay, well, anyway, you should still subscribe.
They
regardless.
settled for $640,000.
Okay, then.
Holy shit!
I should just get in the business of suing companies. Apparently,
Apparently, yeah.
that should just be my job. Just find ways to sue. Companies.
What the? Yeah.
America, baby, where you have the right to your freedom to sue people. Hell yeah, guns and suing, guns and lawyers.
Well, yeah, fuck me. Okay.
Instead, we'll talk about this game from Japan. No, from Italy, not Japan.
From Italy,
Japan,
yeah.
From Italy.
So, I mean, to start off, we're gonna breeze past some of the more generic stuff. You know, the GM's role, learn the rules, gather inspiration.
Well, so
take
something
a look
occurred
at
to me. I don't think we actually, we or not. I don't think we didn't talk about like combat in the last episode, really, at all.
Did we not?
No, we kind of brought up the conflict stuff, but we never mentioned like combat necessarily specifically. Yeah, I feel like we should maybe mention it real quick. I mean,
yeah, so they get into it we'll get into it later on in the designing battle section, because I think it's just a good place to drop it in.
Okay, I guess we can do that. I'll accept that.
Like you said, I'm trying to do it according to the book.
Well, I was gonna make an exception for that one because we forgot it last time, but fair enough.
Yeah. It does actually have some really cool Session Zero stuff that I wanted to go over real quick. And this is stuff that everyone has already heard of, but there's a few little nuggets, if you will, that I really enjoyed.
Well, I mean, so the... Never mind. Nope, never mind. Not the part I was thinking. Continue.
Okay. Continue. So, I mean, it's pretty simple. It starts off giving you some general advice for how to run your Session Zero. The first one is help everyone else, which is just saying, like, everyone at the table help each other out. It's a collaborative thing. Work together to build the world and your characters. Ask questions when a player picks a certain option for their character. Have them tell everyone about it. Where did they learn it? What's their combat style? Why did they choose this specific theme? Provide questions by each class entry, or the questions provided by each class entry can be a huge help. I'm going to bring those up in a second. I really liked this point because this is what I did in Lancer, and it does not tell you to do this in Lancer, and I'm pretty sure it doesn't tell you to do this in D&D either. But I think it's a really important part of Character Creator that lets players feel more invested, when they come to you an idea and you go, oh, cool. All right, well, what about this thing? What about this thing? Have you thought about this? Like, this is everything I did to my players, When Siffy was coming up to me with her idea for her, like, Evangelion Berserker character, immediately I was like, okay, so you're from the Carrick and Trade Baronies. What major house are you from? If you're part of the Baronies, what is the main, export of your planet? Is there anything that it's known for outside of that? Do they have a big military force? Stuff like that,
Guess what I'm gonna.
I think it's something that should be taught more.
That's what I'm gonna mention.
They talk about that in Apocalypse World.
They may or may not do that. Yeah. Well, so because Apocalypse World, so not quite the same, but because of Apocalypse World's. Actually, I think they do mention some questions based on the playbook specifically, but also because Apocalypse World has you have your history questions, which are like your relationships to other characters and stuff. It sort of, it prompts conversations like that anyway. So, yeah, basically, Dungeon World does that too with the bonds, because bonds in that game are like a statement about your character. So, the statement is made like, last time I was in a dungeon with X, they failed me. And then, the players are like, okay, what was the dungeon? Why were we there? And how did I fail you? Right? Like, it prompts that question just by existing. So that's a thing too. D&D might, I think D&D mentions that the classes. I think D&D says something about the classes focusing on different parts of the setting. But I don't know if it prompts a specific question. I'm trying to like.
Let's put it this way: it doesn't put it in enough detail that I remember it, and I've read through the player's handbook a couple times.
So it kind of talks about it in the opening blurb. Oh no, okay, so this is what I was thinking about. So the first page of chapter 3 in the new player's handbook, it says character classes provide a character with a blah blah blah. So it basically gives you a little blurb on each class. So like it says barbarian, storm with rage and wade into hand-to-hand combat, then follow the path of the ... berserker to unleash raw violence, wild heart to manifest kinship. And then there's a little bit of a lore paragraph at the beginning of each of them talking about the vibe. So like D&D tries to do it, but it doesn't give the GM any specific questions to ask. And I think that's the big thing, is having specifically prompted questions. Like a good example being, if your character's a wizard, you might say, where did you learn your wizardliness, right? Like, did you go to what college did you go to? Or the fact that the bard colleges are called colleges, right? So you're like, all right, what's the story behind that? So yeah, I think a lot of games have tackled it in various ways, but this game, if I remember correctly, Fabula just gives you straight up questions per class, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I tend to find very direct questions to be pretty helpful, or something like an Apocalypse World mechanic where it's like a specific mechanic. That was really long. I mean, that was a very long-winded way of me saying I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I for sure, it absolutely should be like a bespoke thing that can be relied upon more readily. Again, I sort of pat myself on the back. I had thought to do this in Lancer and to a lesser degree in Hellscape. So, I'm just slapping myself on the back. I mean, really yamming it up with myself in the corner.
I think if you play enough, it's gonna become. It's like if you play enough RPGs, these questions are just gonna feel natural to do anyway. Like it's kind of hard to ignore the impulse because it just makes the most sense. No,
it does. Yes.
So
after that, we have the stir their creative juices, which is just, encourage them to add interesting narrative elements to the world. Shout out to our buddy Ant, because this is exactly what he did in the Fire Emblem campaign. Think about threats and villains. This one's pretty self-explanatory. The universe does not happen in a vacuum. What are the villains doing while your players are doing their own thing? How are they pushing the plot as much as the players are? Which is good. Keep track of changes. This is where a lot of games talk about this in the sense of clocks, like use clocks to denote the passage of time and the advancement of the bad guys' evil schemes. And the one that I thought you would probably get a kick out of, Josh, is the start things off with a bang, which is literally the in media res, yes. Start with the bank heist, don't start at the tavern kind of shit. Yes. It does specifically make mention of, don't be afraid to set some high stakes during the prologue. While slow buildups can work, an explosive beginning is often more memorable. Perhaps we first meet our heroes while they're being chased by a huge monster or hours away from being executed for treason. Do your best to keep everyone engaged and on their toes.
Yeah.
Very good. Like a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I've said it once, say it again. I see no reason not to do it that way. So. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think if it depends on the story you're trying to tell, and to be fair, like we've talked about the in media res can take place in several different ways. Like you can have a more calm in media res, like the something like an episode of Columbo, where the episode starts off with Columbo walking into the crime scene and being like, "Well, what's going on here?" And they sort of describe what happened. The
the style of in media res can be different based on genre, right? Like, this is such a trite example, but it's the one that popped in my head. If you're running your Game of Thrones game, right? Like, your in media res vibe could be walking into a chamber during a banquet and there's like a bit of an argument going on or whatever, right? Because genre-wise, that is more relevant to that thing. So in media res does not have to mean it doesn't excuse me, it doesn't have to mean
you good there, Plague Walker?
Yeah, we're trying. It doesn't have to mean somebody kicks the door in and starts waving a gun around. It could mean a couple of different things. But really the point of it for me is just something is already happening. And because something is already happening, players don't have to have that awkward, I don't know what to do response, because they can just immediately respond to what's occurring. You know?
Yeah, for sure.
That's how that be.
Yeah. After this, we've got some other more generic stuff. Portray wondrous world, manage information, seek input from others. This is some pretty generic DM advice that I don't think really we don't need to go over too much. Stuff to do in between sessions is similar. It's just your basic prep. Design new monsters, ask the players what their goals are, think about what the villains are doing. The thing I do want to get to is the specific questions we brought up earlier for the character classes, because I like these a lot. The paragraph says, when players choose to invest levels in classes, it means that they care about what that class can contribute to the game. Mechanically, classes are bundles of skills, but they also influence the character's general concept and inform the kind of scenes that will take place during the game, as well as the adversaries you will create. Below, you will find useful advice on how to help your group make the most out of their character classes, and how to build situations around their abilities. Pay special attention to what classes are chosen during character creation, since they will determine the character's role and abilities for quite a while. At the start, we have Arcanist. Arcanist, again, to those of you who might not remember, is the spirit caller, summoner. You summon a mystical arcana and then fuse it with your body to be tranced up, kind of like Final Fantasy IX. Anyone knows what that is like. I guess for a more modern interpretation, it's kind of like what Percy did with Orthax, like his weird possessed state where he's got the cool shadow magic.
You talking about for the Arcanist?
Yes.
I thought it was
I'm talking yeah.
I thought they were summoning it.
Yes, so you are summoning it and then you fuse with it. And then at the very end, when you hit their max level, you can choose the heroic skill called Grand Summoning, where you actually let it fight with you. Remember, this game hates pet classes.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So the questions to ask the Arcanist are as follows. By the way, we did karaoke on Saturday, so if everyone wonders why my voice is fucking shot, that's why. I did a lot of screaming. Question 1. Arcana should play an important role in the setting. Perhaps a cult or religious empire worships them, or they are seen as proof of noble lineage. Question 2. Spend some time thinking up the kind of quest or trial required to bind each arcanum. These should be tied to the arcanum's power and concept. For instance, binding the tower might require sacrificing something dear in order to protect others. Number 3. Create new arcana in addition to the ones presented in this book, using those as a guideline. If the Arcanist is also a lore master or comes from a long line of summoners, you should create these new arcana together with the player. The Arcanist progression is based upon encountering new arcana. Keep this in mind and make sure they get chances to do so. The game is literally telling you how to think about having this kind of player in your party.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of taking extra time with those one, not only because the Arcanist is my favorite class, but I do think this is the best example, the first one they give you, which is really coming out the gate swinging when it tells you how to really think about these things. We're not going to go over each one because there's 15 main classes and each one has about 4 questions. So that's a lot, but I will just go through and think about, like, pick out some standout ones that I really like. The Darkblade, aka Dark Knight. You start off as an Oathbreaker, basically. That's your whole thing. You're a dark paladin.
Something made you big sad.
Yeah. Or
and
your
then your
seal
sadness is your, rage and power.
Yeah. The final question for Darkblade is, there might come a time when a Darkblade can finally leave their past behind. When this happens, you might have their skills flipped. Maybe they can now create bonds of affection with Heart of Hope and unleash light magic with Celestial Strike. Discuss this option with the player and see if it's something that interests them. That's really cool. The game is literally telling you, they might just reset their skills and pick new ones if they think that's what's necessary. Paladin wants to do this. I love that. Yeah, Paladin wants to play the Paladin. Yeah, we know. Yeah. But yeah, Paladin was talking about doing this while I was over this week or last week.
I mean,
like this exact thing with his character.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, it's funny because they mentioned, it's like, oh, here's a little idea you could do with your Dark Knight, like your Darkblade character. And my immediate thought was, I kind of wanted to make an official class that specifically says you have to do it this way.
That would be cool, yeah.
Right?
Also, like it would make sense because this game, like we've discussed, is, despite how freeform it is and how much you can do, it is actually quite strict about what it says you should or should not do. Like we'll get into it later, but even when it comes to like what the GM can do when they're discussing magic items, they straight up say, do not do this thing if you are going to design your own magic items. They're not like, they don't say, maybe you should think about it. They just say you cannot do that.
Yeah,
granted, you're the GM. You can technically do whatever the fuck you want, but the fact that they're saying don't do it means that they've put quite a bit of thought behind it and probably have a point.
Yeah, it's they're firm about their they do the thing that I always say games should do is like be firm and just tell me what to do straight up, because it's a role-playing game. The idea that I can do whatever I want or ignore your advice is implied within the style of game, so you don't need to pussyfoot around your statements. Just say them as if they're hard and fast rules, because it's essential. Yeah. Essentially, it's a everyone's in on the secret, and the secret is that nothing is a hard and fast rule, and we all know that, but we pretend like that's not the case. Is essentially what you should do.
Yes.
Some people might disagree with that logic, but too bad, you're wrong.
They're wrong.
Yeah.
Shut the fucking Predator moment. Just the high five.
Yeah. So yes, I do think it would be interesting if the game made a paladin class of some kind, or made a call it like a redeemed blade or whatever, and it specifically said you have to start as a dark blade and then redeem yourself somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that would be cool as fuck. I admit, I would be down for that.
It also mentions some mechanical shit, like it says in the Darkblade section, due to their ability to negate dark damage, undead are extremely resilient to the Darkblade's Shadow Strike, so keep that in mind for fights. So they also mentioned this class may be good at this or that, so be aware. For the Fury, in battle the Fury hits hard, or in battle hit the Fury hard. They are quite resilient and can deal serious damage when in crisis. Hurt them and they will look to hurt you back twice as hard. So there's some mechanical recommendation also, which is good.
Yes. One thing I really liked was the Entropist. What is it? Entropic magic is deeply tied to death, chaos, and oblivion. It can be easily seen as villainous magic, but the player characters are heroes. Create situations in which this contrast becomes important. Entropists are among the few characters capable of dealing damage with no type, causing direct HP loss, limiting enemy actions, and granting allies additional turns. Create conflicts where these abilities can prove vital. And the final one, which I really like, is Ritual Entropism can achieve incredible effects, such as altering time and space. These rituals are expensive and dangerous, but a player is still free to attempt them. Just remember that failure will be proportionally devastating. Them basically being like, entropy is the pure, unadulterated soul stuff of magic, and it can kind of do whatever the fuck.
It's the chaos magic.
Lean into it. Yeah, it's the chaos magic. Lean into it. And that's the real lesson there. Just lean into it.
I don't remember. Does it specifically say in the ritual section that, like, if a player fails a ritual roll, the sort of magical repercussion should be quite catastrophic? Like, does it say that in that section?
They don't say that it should always be catastrophic, but it does specify that it is a thing that can happen, and to not pull your punches. If the players want to do some like really universe altering shit,
yeah,
whack them hard if they fuck up. Like that's
right. Yeah, I mean, yeah,
and I agree. Like,
yeah, essentially, it's like you can do something crazy, but if you fail, I get to do something crazy in response. Yeah, I just couldn't remember if it specifically said that in the ritualism section or not. Because if it didn't, didn't say that, but then it said it in this little chunk talking about the entropist, that would be a little odd. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. The Furies also has a really good one where they say, anger and passion are core elements of a Fury. Build scenes in which acting upon instinct can be detrimental, and always show how the consequences of violence or recklessness. There's a reason Furies are seen as ticking time bombs by most people around them, and some might feel unsafe when a Fury is present. That's really cool. That like informs a huge swath of the roleplay that's involved with the monk-like character, right? You are just sort of a ball of fists that likes to punch things as hard as physically possible. People might not take well to that, you know?
Yeah.
There might be some umbrage taken because you keep punching people in the face, a la Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Interesting. Interesting.
Have I not told you about that?
Oh, question mark.
So Jean-Claude Van Damme, a la Bloodsport and the kickboxer.
Yes, Johnny Cage.
Is notorious for being is very notorious for being sued by stunt doubles because he refused to not kick them in the face.
Oh.
So they'd do a stunt and they'd be like, all right, John, please don't kick Timothy in the fucking face again. This is a stunt. And he'd be like, nope, got it. Yep, nope, won't do it again. And then toma, and then
break his fucking
reverse
nose.
Spin kick someone upside the head. Yeah.
Got it. See.
Kind of an asshole.
See.
Yeah. Good times.
Didn't Jackie Chan also have a similar thing people use?
Yes, because this whole thing was like for the shot, and if the shot involved getting yoked the fuck out, then sorry, bud, you were getting yoked.
Yeah.
That's what you get paid the money for. Get your ass kicked by Jackie Chan.
Anyway.
Yeah. These go on. I mean, there's a few more I guess we can do. Actually, I do like this one for Sharpshooter. This one I like because it kind of levels with you, right? As one of the more combat-oriented classes in the game, the Sharpshooter is relatively straightforward. They do one thing, and they do it well. When designing battles for your group, create situations in which their abilities can shine. Flying enemies, in particular, are the bane of melee classes.
Yeah.
That's great. You know now, as a Sharpshooter, when you get the chance, don't do it all the time, because then it loses its shine, but when you get the chance, when it makes sense, throw flying, it reminds you to throw flying enemies in. Because, it's true. Your monk who has no ranged attacks is going to get really pissed if the harpy just keeps flying and punching him in the back of the head.
Yeah.
What was that?
Especially because
flying.
But seemed what?
You were just like, yeah. Like you're speaking from experience.
No, I just, talking's hard. I got a lot of mucus in my face.
Fair enough.
That was I don't know, it was an acknowledgement. Yeah. Like, yes, because especially because flying in this game is not like it's not I'm 30 feet in the air, and if you're 10 feet high, you can hit me in the toesies or whatever. It's just, if an enemy is flying, it is assumed the melee combatant cannot affect, like, flying is effectively a status condition. That means you can't be hit by melee attacks. So if characters start flying, you have to find a way to deal with it. Now, because of the way the combat works in this game, and the sort of, one of your actions is literally called, what is it, like a make an opportunity or something, or no, or what's
Something like that, yeah.
One of the actions that you can do is basically just advancing a countdown clock or moving towards an objective. So you could make your objective to like jump on the harpy's back and hold on or something like that. So it's not that you can't do nothing. But it's like you have to overcome the status effect that is flying if you are a melee combatant, whereas the sharpshooter can just immediately hit. Yeah, okay. The action's just called objective. So you work towards accomplishing an objective within the conflict. This will require an attribute check or an opposed check. Complex goals will often require a clock. Like, you could just say your objective is grab the harpy by the legs and pile drive her into the floor so she can't fly away.
Knock that fucker out the sky.
Yeah. But the sharpshooter's just like, Lamau, I have bow. Yeah.
Once again, hit him with the Oma.
Yep. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, those are the ones that stuck out the most to me, the ones I liked a lot. After that, we can move on to the art of villains, which is a cool section, and it helps you sort of, as the names kind of describes, plan and build your villains in the game and how to organize their goals, how important they should be, stuff like that.
I also like that it gave 3 different stages of villain, because when the game originally mentioned villains earlier on in the book, I just assumed villains just meant like boss dudes, but it can actually be more to it than that. Because it mentions, first of all, there are minor, major, and supreme villains.
Supreme, I love that they use supreme. It's great.
Supreme, yeah. You also have the ability to escalate your villains, which I think is really fun. I think escalate, we'll get to it, but I think escalate is a very funny mechanic.
Yeah, it has potential to be kind of weird, but it has the potential fucking cool if you can nail it.
It has the potential to be really obnoxious, but it's very on genre.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that your villain just goes, Lamau, I just get cooler. Yeah. I just get to be cooler. And you're like, wait a minute, pause. Actually fucking pause. What are you talking about?
Yeah, what do you mean, bitch?
Yeah. So I mean, we can go over the minor villains real quick because it's a small section.
Well,
they talk about
right. Yeah. Wait, which part are you referring? You mean the goals?
Just that first bit with like them describing the kinds of villains.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So they talk about minor villains are generally have some simple or at least very personal goals, such as saving someone's life, stealing a magical artifact, or seizing control of a village. This is like your orc chieftain, your like bandit captain kind of guys. Major villains should have complex goals that can affect large amounts of people, such as conquering a kingdom or destroying a divine being.
This is the general.
This is your... What's up?
The general.
Yeah, this is the general. This is your... See, I didn't play Endwalker, so for me, this is like your Xenos. This is your Emmett Selk.
I would say Xenos and Emmett fall under supreme villains.
Do they? Okay, so yes. I guess a more accurate would be...
Gaius. Gaius is a major.
Or Gaius, yeah.
Yeah.
So they're the general. They're the evil king, for example. Your maybe evil boyfriend in a dumb mask and funny helmet who pilots the red robot. That guy.
It took me a second to get the reference on that one. Yeah.
I'm happy you did. It makes me happy that you got it.
Took me a second. The song started playing in my head. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Oh my god! To anyone who knows who we're talking about, and you're not one of our friends specifically that I talk their heads off about all the time, please comment that. I've never betrayed someone a day in my life.
That's cap, sir.
That is absolute fucking cap, sir. Quattro. Yes, and then you have your supreme villains who who have goals that can affect the entire world or change the laws of reality, rewinding time, erasing soul energy, or even becoming a deity. This is your Sin, Jekt,
it's Sephiroth.
Vecna, fucking Sephiroth, Kefka.
Sephiroth rewinds time, erases soul energy, and becomes a deity. He does all three of these things.
He does, in fact, do
he does
all three of those things. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sephiroth is that
Kefka
bitch.
also does those exact things.
Yes, they are that bitch.
Fucking Kefka also, or Sin does the exact, or I guess Jekt does the exact same thing.
I don't know about erasing soul energy, but yeah, kind of. He winds
he's
time forward.
Yeah, well, so remember, Sin's whole thing is it devours souls.
Oh, that's true. It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Anytime you play a JRPG and they're like, yeah, we're going to kill God, that's your supreme villain.
Yeah.
That's usually your supreme villain.
What's his name in Persona 5? Yaldabaoth?
Yaldabaoth.
Yeah. Yaldabaoth.
Yeah. Yaldabaoth, the
dork,
the Gnostic god, Gnostic capital God. Yeah, yeah. I was explaining to Paladin how comically overpowered Joker is. In like the Persona canon, when Yaldabaoth's thing is like, I can't be hurt by any means necessary. And Joker basically goes, all right, cool. Well, since I'm the ultimate rebel, I just tell you that rule doesn't fucking work.
Apply to
Here's
me.
my gun.
Yeah.
And then literally he's like, oh no, he's got a gun. And then he gets shot and dies. Imagine pulling a Glock on God and being like, I know shit, that's crazy. That's a gun.
And then the Glock actually works because you're just that Shadley.
It just worked because you were like, no, I don't think I will.
Yeah, I fuck your rules, bro.
Imagine turning an actual Uno reverse card into a bullet and shooting God on the fucking face with it.
The Persona series.
I love Persona so fucking much, dude.
I mean, here's the thing. Persona 3, Minato's basically like, dying? Nah, dying's lame as shit, bro. We ain't doing that. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, well, he pulls bullshit too, because it was like, you can't kill death. And he's like, I don't need you. I can just kick you into a locker, you nerd.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. All right, yes. Anyway. They do discuss the escalating thing here a little bit. They talk about it a little earlier in the game, but we missed that. It's fun.
Did they talk about it somewhere earlier?
Yes, they talk about it in the game rules section when they talk about villains, which is to say, villains can do this really cool thing called escalating, where they essentially jump a tier.
Pause. Wait, I feel like... Wait, where else did this... Wait,
pages 102 through 103.
Oh. This feels like a slightly odd spot for this to be? Okay.
Because it has nothing to do with the players? Yeah.
All right, well, whatever.
Yes. Villains have this really cool ability where they can do something called escalate. And what that does is it basically allows your villain to jump a tier. One tier specifically. I mean, technically they can jump both tiers if they're a minor and they can become a supreme, but that's not likely in the game. Sort of suggests that you maybe don't do that and not use this ability a lot, because it does a lot of crazy shit. If a minor villain, for example, escalates to a major villain, they reset all of their ultimate points, which are the DM's version of Fabula points. They're the bad luck, make your rolls harder kind of stuff. It sets those back to full, resets all of their hit points, and removes them from the surrendered state, which is crazy. You basically just have to fight them again. You probably aren't going to. The DM, if they're, not being stupid, will just be like, yes, they teleport away, because at that point you're just going to die. But it allows them to sort of level up in a narrative sense, right? Like,
Yeah, I
Hell,
think the
even
intention is that they escalate and then they do the thing where they're like, you thought you defeated me, but in fact I have just been biding my time to unlock my ultimate power, and then they fly off into space and you have to go fly to the moon to fight them again. I think that's the idea. It's not that they Super Saiyan up and then you fight them again.
Yes.
I think that defeats the purpose a little bit.
Well, it could be it could be the other one, right? It could be I think the best example of this is actually Resident Evil. Whenever you kick someone's ass in Resident Evil, they go, well, now I'm going to turn into a giant, hideous monster.
I mean,
and you're kind of just like, why? I just feel like that was, can you turn back, dog? And the answer's probably no. So, L's, but yeah.
The answer's yes. The answer's basically always no.
You're probably just clowning yourself, frankly, and get fucked, loser, I guess.
I don't know. Does it say that they like fully heal and shit too when they escalate?
They do, yes.
Say that.
Yeah.
See.
Yeah, it's escalation is pretty powerful. The game says that typically speaking, you should only have villains escalate 2 to 4 times total through the game. So that's not to have one villain escalate that many times, but maybe the orc chieftain jumps into like a Mako reactor. I don't know why I put orcs and Mako in the same place. Whatever. They jump into the magical reactor and they get like kind of cooler, and now it's it's actually a 2-stage boss fight. And then you would probably save the rest for, I mean, it's Sephiroth, right? He's like, he's the super soldier who everyone thought was good, and then surprise, he's evil, and he's just like a really cool soldier. And then he keeps getting beefed up with weird alien shit. And then eventually he just becomes a weird giant angel man who's dropping meteors and throwing you into other dimensions. Yeah.
And
then you have to ring King Arthur up on speed dial to kick his ass for you.
I don't actually think they do heal. I don't think it says they do here.
Do they not? Hold on.
No. It doesn't say anything about like what their stat situation is. I guess they're getting a new stat sheet technically, or maybe not. I don't know. It actually doesn't say anything about how to handle them, like the mechanical aspect of that.
I thought they did, but I guess not.
No, they don't.
Back to the actual GM section with this. Let's see, what were they talking about? They sort of
I was just gonna the thing, like, escalation's kind of a wild thing because it's like, we defeated the villain, and the villain's like, LOL, JK, no, you didn't. And on the good side, this allows you to do that thing that I think a lot of GMs often want to do, where I want a villain to be a reoccurring villain, right? Like, this is a good way to do that because, the players have defeated them, but then he escalates and then he runs away and then, he disappears or whatever, and then they can fight him again. So that's kind of the beneficial aspect to it, in much the same way as when you're playing a video game and you like beat the boss and then they fuck off and they're like, we'll meet again, right? That whole shit. On the bad side, you could do the thing where, like, mechanically you're just a dickhead GM and every villain just escalates every single time to just bully your players. But this game is very much coming at...
You could, but I do think...
things that way.
No, and the game specifically says don't do that.
It says
a GM
don't
could
do
always
it.
do it to be a dick, but the game does specifically point out that, like, you're thinking about it wrong if you do that.
Well, the game says don't do it, and the game, I think, just in general is much more designed around the flow. Like, the game is more concerned with the flow of the fiction than it is the mechanical implications of something like that. Again, as opposed to a game like D&D, which is much more focused on the mechanical like an escalation ability in D&D. Well, actually, an escalation ability exists in D&D. It's called mythic encounters, right?
I was gonna say the mythic phase, yeah.
Yeah, like the mythic phase in D&D is essentially the same thing, but Fabula talks about it from a narrative standpoint and what it does for the fiction, whereas D&D is like, this is what this thing does mechanically. Also, if you want to tie it into the fiction, here's how you tie it into the fiction. Like, the fiction's an afterthought in D&D, whereas the fiction's the main focus in Fabula. So if you're coming at it from the D&D angle when it comes to escalations, it's like, yeah, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. After that, it does talk about some examples for escalation. Perhaps the young wizard minor villain suddenly realizes that he must steal magical energy from the entire country to revive the loved one. He will fail, likely due to the player's intervention. The desperate wizard seeks a way to merge with the entities of time and space, erasing reality and becoming a timeline that again becomes a supreme villain. That's a wild jump. That's not even like...
Yeah, it's like he wants to revive someone. Oh, I need to make a philosopher's stone and kill the entire city. Oh, I need to just rewrite reality. Like, damn, all right, bro.
Yeah.
And create a whole new timeline where my lover was never killed.
That's a 14 thing. I feel like that's not a 14. That's a Final Fantasy thing for sure. I'm trying to remember who does that.
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I think that's fucking Caius. I think it's Caius from 13. Caius Cassius.
Oh, I didn't play 13.
Shout out to you, Aster, for me watching you play that game for a while.
I will say one thing. I wish the game gave a little bit of advice on how to handle the escalation, like narratively and or like narratively in the moment. So it says the young wizard realizes he must steal magical energy from an entire country to revive a loved one and then becomes a major villain. Okay. In the moment, the players fight the wizard. They beat him. You choose to do an escalation. Should I have him just disappear, teleport away? Does he like get up and run out of the room? Like, how should I handle the in the moment of the escalation? I don't think the game gives a ton of advice on that, which I feel like probably should be in there. Now, granted, I can come up with plenty of ideas myself, but from a newer GM standpoint, I feel like it'd be helpful to be like, here's a couple of ways you could have the villain escalate and then escape, or escalate and then do something else, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that they assume, and again, I'm sort of inferring here. I imagine that they assume that the idea is that, the players finish beating him, they do their good guy speech, and as they're, saving the princess or whatever, you as the players in like a GM scene see him like crawl into the vat of energy or whatever.
Yeah, see, but that's you coming up with an idea and inferring a thought. It doesn't give any direct advice though. Doesn't like with if you're gonna give this example with the young wizard, like kind of give me a full example. Like say the young wizard like realizes they're defeated and then activates this like forbidden artifact that they had kept away as a last resort, and then it, they disappear like out of nowhere. Nobody knows where they went, but they don't have time to like investigate because they have to leave the castle. Like, give me a full scene play out of what you think this should look like, just so I have a clear idea. I only need like one example. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I don't think you're wrong for wanting that. That's
just one spot I feel like it didn't mention on the escalation thing.
Yeah.
Again, there's a bazillion ideas I could come up with them. I don't, obviously, but pressure. Under pressure.
Yes, the pressure. After that, the game references something called pressure, which is to say, this is the using clocks to this is your fronts, right? This is the stuff is going on in the background. This is your player's reason for actually going on their quest. I think that sort of keeps them on their toes. And it is like Apocalypse World described using clocks. When a player, it says very specifically, when a villain's plans advance, you must let the players know about it using either a game master scene or rumors spread by NPCs about how the villain is doing their villainous things. They are very clear that, like, don't let shit go on in the background and then just not fucking explain what that shit is.
So this little tidbit I thought was kind of interesting when it talked about pressure. I think pressure is not a great subtitle for this particular bit, but whatever. Not a great header. It says you must, so specifically, when the villain's plans advance, you must clearly communicate it to the players, perhaps with an appropriate GM scene or through rumors and conversations the heroes have with the NPCs in the game world. Don't just surprise them with a casual, oh yeah, did I mention this guy you didn't know about has successfully rewritten reality? that quote is a very extreme example of this, but I think it's funny that they mention that you must clearly communicate it, because Apocalypse World and Blades do not say that. In fact, whether you clearly communicate that a countdown clock or a front is moving in either of those games is up to you as the GM, whether you communicate that information at all. Because, like, so for Blades, you know, there's a lot of factions doing stuff in the background, so the player characters couldn't possibly know what they're all up to. And then when you're dealing with Apocalypse World, it basically says if a front is happening and the players do not interact with it, then you don't really need to tell them anything about it, because they're choosing to ignore it or not interact with it. Like, as long as they kind of know it exists, that's kind of it. So I think it's interesting that this game is like, no, you have to tell them stuff is moving forward, which feels, I mean, it makes sense because it feels a little bit more heroic fantasy that the heroes are always aware of the villains' like evil machinations, even if that doesn't maybe make sense. You know, just thought interesting little interesting GM tidbit there, because the games that this game is pulling from specifically don't tell you to do this. They say it's kind of up in the air for how your players handle it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think a degree of that should be a thing, right? Like, even with the game that I'm running now, I'm not going to go into the full, what they refer to as GM scenes and do the evil villain monologue. But every time they get back from mission and they go to one of the bars or clubs that they always frequent, they're always hearing gossip. You know, like, oh, did you hear that this megacorp is trying to move in on this position now? Oh, did you see that, like, there's like increased activity with Lancers in this area? Just to show that those things are moving, and whether or not it's up to the players to like do anything about it or memorize that information's up to them. But like,
well, that's kind of what Blades and Apocalypse World are saying. Like, stuff happens, you know, you're in Apocalypse World and there's a gang on the outskirts near the town you live in, and they're up to some shit. And then you have an NPC casually walk by and mention something, and the players can choose to interact with that information or not. That's kind of what Apocalypse World is saying. This game is very specifically saying, like, they need to know directly. You know, like, it's being a little more firm. Like, you must, because the key word here, you must always clearly communicate, right? So it can't be ambiguous, because if you do a GM scene, which is the thing where the camera cuts away and shows what the villain is up to, that's very explicit. Or it mentions, you know, or through rumors and conversation. But because of that clearly part, that makes me say, okay, so if they hear a rumor, it's not that two people are talking and then they hear some information. It's like two people are talking, and then one of the two guys that are talking turns to the player characters and like, did you hear about this crazy thing that happened yesterday? Like, talks to the players directly, because that is clearly informing them. You know what I mean? It's that scene. It's the thing where two people are talking about something in a movie or whatever, and it's too convenient that the subject they are talking about is immediately important to the main character, right? But the main character just happens to be there. It's that kind of a thing, which from a realism standpoint is kind of goofy, but from a like narrative story, like movie and or video game standpoint makes sense. That's kind of that. I think Fabula is implying like the person who has the rumor should tell the player straight up for whatever reason, you know, like, however you want to justify.
Like, I don't think you necessarily need to go that hard with it.
Well, the clearly part, what I'm saying is the clearly part makes it seem like there can't be any ambiguity on them receiving that information. Like, they have to receive it, and it needs to be direct. You know,
yes,
the barkeep hands them the newspaper, and the first news story on the newspaper is exactly what they need to know about. You know what I mean? That kind of a thing.
I see what you're saying. To me, what I think direct is like, you know, they're at the bar, the bartender turns the news on, and it's like, you know, breaking news: the evil villain has destroyed this city. You know, like, that's
That's what I was just saying.
Direct just means the fact that you're bringing direct. It's not something that they have to find or look for. It just has to be presented to them.
Right, but that you just gave the exact same example I did.
I don't know.
The barkeeper hands them the newspaper, and the story that they need to know is the first thing on the story. In the same way, you turn on the TV and the characters in the movie, the TV news broadcast is exactly the thing they needed to know. Like that's the same thing. That's what I was saying.
Kinda, yeah.
It was literally the same thing. What?
Well, so my distinction was like, you know, the person handed it to them, whereas I was sort of seeing it as more of an ambient thing.
Well, it's ambient. It's ambient, quote unquote, in terms of the in-universe. Like the bartender dropped the newspaper on the table, not necessarily handing it to them. He was just putting it on the table. So yeah, it's ambient in the sense of the NPC was not giving it to them directly, but it's not ambient in the sense that you, the GM, are saying to the players, this is vital information. Like it's a player-to-player thing, is my point. You are clearly giving it to the players. It's not so much how the characters rationalize it doesn't matter. The point is it has to be clearly communicated, which means player-to-player conversation. I, GM, am telling you this newspaper has information you need. The bartender isn't saying that, but I, as the GM, am saying that. There's a bazillion ways you can frame it in the fiction. The difference is that it's a direct player-to-player information, whereas, you know, Apocalypse World doesn't say you as the GM have to tell them as the players. Like it doesn't say you have to do that. That's a kind of important distinction because it's a difference.
Yes, I mean,
at the end of the day, it's a difference in genre. That's what it comes down to. The genre that is Fabula Ultima makes more sense for the GM to be very direct with this information, whereas the genre that Apocalypse World is going for, you don't necessarily need that. Can do it that way, but you don't have to do it that way. That's the kind of key difference. Genre expectation is the key difference there.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Goddamn.
After that, they do a little more sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Oh God, extrapolation. They do a little bit more extrapolation, or what they expect from you to extrapolate upon with your villains. You know, characterizing them more, making them not just one note, like Skeletor villains. You know, they talk about either making them the tragic villain, the dark mirror of your players. Maybe your players are heroes, and they you know, it's the typical the friends we made along the way, whereas the antagonist feels alone and abandoned. Heroes fight for justice. The antagonist, yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think this is very fun. Oh. Slight backtrack. The other thing that the important important like storytelling thing about the pressures idea too, and the villains and countdown clocks and all that. The thing to keep in mind, a great saying. I don't know where the fuck this comes from because it's one of those. It's been repeated too many times to know the history, the origin anymore. Villains are active and heroes are reactive. That's why the villains have countdown clocks, because they're trying to do a thing and the heroes are reacting to the thing they're trying to do. Because if all is well, the heroes would not be doing heroing stuff, because if the world is safe, then they don't need to do anything, right? That's kind of what the pressures thing is really getting at, is that heroes or villains are actively trying to do a thing. Which is the crux. Otherwise, you don't have a conflict otherwise.
Yeah, you just.
Well, I was gonna say, you have a situation.
Well, you have a sandbox. You have an empty sandbox with nothing going on, right? If the villain isn't being evil, then why is he there?
Well, yeah, they're just around. The
imagine Arcade
side,
if Silco was just like a philanthropist. Didn't control a drug empire. He was just like vibing. Having a good old time, just vibing, yeah,
making money. I will say the unexpected side thing, I just think it's kind of fun. It's like, don't make a one-dimensional antagonist. I immediately just thought about Xenos in 14 and how his entire shtick is, I just so badly want to fight my friend, really badly. Just please let us fight. That was so fucking cool. Can we please fight again? That's his whole thing. That's it. My man's has nothing else going on. No thoughts, head empty, only violence.
Well, so you know what it is with him, though? The reason why I think it works is because he's like the definition of a magnificent bastard.
Well, some people argue it doesn't work, but continue.
I mean, they're wrong, but
there's a subset. Like half the internet fucking despises Xenos as a character and thinks he's just the worst character in the entire game and maybe the worst Final Fantasy character ever.
I think they're like, so Xenos I think pulls from a very old archetype of character. You know, he literally pulls from the rival. You know, the character who's literally just there to throw hands with you at any given time.
Yeah, I mean, his shtick is literally that nothing. So there's actually
he's just so cool that nothing can fucking challenge him anymore.
Well, yeah, he's so cool and amazing. So there's actually a short story that adds to his backstory that makes him kind of make more sense. He's just so good at killing and fighting that and he's so aloof and nihilistic about life that nothing brought him joy or emotion. He gave a fuck about literally nothing. And then he killed a dude one time and was like, that was the coolest shit I've ever done. I'm just going to chase that high. So he's just been chasing the high of incredible violence his entire life since he was like 14, I think. And he was chasing that high for so long that he became an absolute giga chad of violence, so no one could stand up to him. And then finally the Warrior of Light comes along and gives him a fight, and he was like, oh my god, I just nutted so hard. And like, that's all he craves. So he's one-dimensional is like an understatement. My man is 0.5 dimensional. He has nothing. He cares about nothing. I mean, literally, there's a scene in Endwalker where Alice like chastises him about being a shitty emperor, and he just looks at her and goes, I literally could not give less of a fuck about anything you have to say. I'm just here to fight. A small child. I don't give a single shit about my people. Why do you think I care? It's like, damn, bro. It's great. Great scene.
We love him for it.
Great scene.
Well, so that even that right there, right? To me, I actually find that pretty multifaceted, right? Because like his goals on the surface seem super fucking basic. He just wants to fight, but he's actually also incredibly like he's insane.
He wants you to kill him.
Yeah, well, that too, right? Like he's even said it. Like this isn't even like he said this way back in fucking the beginning of Stormblood, where he was like, finally someone who can challenge me. Finally, this suffering has to end.
Yeah. He wants you to kill him.
And you like, I think he says the word suffering specifically. And I think in the moment that you think what he's talking about is an end to the boredom, but it could also be very easily be read as an end to his life.
No. Oh no. He means end to his life. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a meaningless existence.
Yes.
Actually, I find Xenos to be incredibly deep, despite how, you know what it is? This is the media literacy test. This is the
need to get through Endwalker because the meaningless existence comment you just made is very pertinent.
I'm fucking sure it is.
Yeah. You need to finish Endwalker for no other reason because Endwalker completes Xenos' story.
Yeah, I know. Man, he's a magnificent bastard. He's great. If people, I feel like if Xenos occupies the same brain space as Kefka.
Yes.
If you don't understand what Kefka's doing, then you're not going to understand Xenos.
I feel like people tend to really like Kefka. So like,
I think people like Kefka because LOL, the Joker, like they don't actually understand what he's doing or why he's doing it. They just like that he's fucking a crazy clown man who's funny.
Maybe? Yeah, I don't know. That's a weird thought. I haven't thought about that recently. Anyway. So, I don't know. This unexpected side comment just made me think about the whole Xenos discourse for 14 because this game is very obviously heavily influenced by Final Fantasy. So, I don't know. I just thought it was kind of funny.
I mean, look, if you can trust 14 fans to do one thing, it's to have bad
takes. It's fair. It's fair.
Look, I know nothing about Wuklamot, but all of the small shit I have seen of her, I'm like, this character's great.
Oh, I can't even begin to go down that rabbit hole, my guy. Jesus.
I'm sure you can't.
Anyway.
Oh, I can't. We're not big enough to get hate comments, but I hope we get some.
I would love to get Wuklamot hate comments. That would fuel me.
I would fucking, it'd be so good.
Anyway.
Yeah. we've spent enough time on the villains, so we're going to move to the next part. It's a lot of just ways to think about them, who they are.
Yeah, the unexpected side, the dark mirror, which is the, they are the like opposite of your characters, your opposite of your group, right? It's the heroes are fighting. The heroes are willing to give up their life. The antagonist is frightened by death, that whole thing. And then it mentions style and mannerisms, which is just to say, like, what's their vibe? Are they the magnificent bastard villain, or are they just too angry man, local man too angry to die, or whatever? And then so this, I feel like this is the conflict abilities. So it talks about them having like different preferred types of conflicts. So it mentioned social occasions, engage the heroes in battle. The most obnoxious villains are the ones that avoid conflict scenes at all costs, which is funny. And then mechanically, it says like the villain should be an elite or a champion, which I'll get to in a bit, but yeah, checks out, makes sense. And then it, did you notice that the boss fight is a bespoke mechanic?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, thought that was interesting. And then what was the dramatic entrance bit? Oh yeah, they should just. It's the scene. It's the Megamind scene. Presentation.
Yeah,
it's the Megamind.
Oh,
scene.
I thought it. For me, it was the fucking. Oh God.
Yeah.
It was the Aizen thing from Bleach, where Ichigo's theme song just stops.
Oh, that's a good one too. Yes.
Where my man just stopped the
Turned
main
off
character's
the
theme,
music,
and
yeah.
you just have to be like,
oh,
wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yes.
He literally does the fucking Alucard. You were talking all that good shit a second ago.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck it. I love Aizen so
also,
much.
actually, they do mention in the conflict abilities, powerful antagonists might be protected by plot armor that prevents the PCs from fighting them unless they have a specific item
specifically
spelled.
call out plot armor.
Generally, don't overdo this. 1 or 2 tricks over the course of an entire campaign is enough. I like that they say, yes, use plot armor, but don't abuse plot armor.
Yeah, it's
which is
very good. I think.
Valid. And then the dungeons section.
The dungeons. I was super cool.
I was shocked to see this in here.
Yeah, I was too. I'm not gonna lie.
I didn't think
several times in the game they're like dungeons can be fucking irrelevant.
Yeah,
like it really depends on you.
I really didn't expect
went out of their way. Yeah. The fact that they went out of their way to be like, we got you, boo boo. Don't you worry. We thought about it. I appreciate that, Fabula Ultima. I appreciate that a lot. I'm not even going front. So they talk about dungeons in this game. They describe dungeons sort of, maybe not specifically, but dungeons are a sort of series of hallways that introduce players to traps, loot, puzzles, and hazards. Right? It doesn't necessarily have to be you're delving in a cave. You can be in a what was one of the ones they talk about?
Well, it goes even more broad than that, because they basically are like, a dungeon could be they're climbing a mountain and there's like 3 specific spots they get to on the mountain that are important, right? Like they use the term dungeon in the much more broad sort of narrative sense of the word, which is that a dungeon is like a string of challenges or events. The forest can be a dungeon, the mountain could be a dungeon, the dungeon could be a dungeon, the prison could be a dungeon. They're very open about it, which, listen, if you get really far down the game design rabbit hole and think it through enough, everything's a dungeon, but we don't need to get into that.
True.
But yeah, so yeah, they keep it very open on purpose. And tell you what the point of it is, which is to say, eroding the hero's resources, telling more about a character, place, or people, which is kind of a thing that I was talking about dealing with random encounters, rewarding careful exploration with hidden treasures, and yada yada. So yeah, the things you're kind of used to in the D&D-esque dungeon.
Yeah, I mean, I like very specifically and that once again you were like, it's there to drain resources, and they go, it's there to drain resources.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
I really like how mask off this game is.
Yes.
It really demystifies a lot of things, and I really, really fucking appreciate that.
Yeah, it's pretty direct with its, like, the advice is very, it's like they're not trying to be flowery with the language or anything. They're like, this is for this. This is how you do it. Don't use it too much. It's annoying, you know? The thing I also appreciate about the game is they put mechanics in this game that they know can be abused, right? The villain escalation system, the idea that they specifically mentioned plot armor, shit like that. They're like, yes, you can use these things. Yes, they can ruin the game if you abuse them. Do not abuse them. Just don't do it. I'm like, yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's like, you might have the urge. Just fucking don't, please.
Yes, whereas D&D, I feel like, tries to do this weird game of, we want to design a cool mechanic, but we can't make it too cool. We need to make sure it has a lot of restrictions so power gamers can't abuse it and be obnoxious to their GM. And it's like, no, stop designing for the assholes. You guys have said yourselves we don't design for assholes, but you clearly are designing for assholes. I can tell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Very frustrating. I hate. Even though they literally said in the player's or was it? It was either the player's handbook or the DMG. Rules aren't physics. Like, don't abuse the game. And I'm like, okay, so you're aware of this, but you still try to, like, perfect the design to be as ironclad as possible, and thus make things kind of less cool sometimes. Like, why? You know?
Yeah.
Whereas this game is like, here's the cool thing. Don't be a dick about it.
Yeah. Now, this game specifically brings up two types of dungeons, which is very cool. You have prepared dungeons and improvised dungeons. The latter half of this, amazing. I'm not even gonna lie.
Yeah,
it's so fucking sick.
Prepared dungeons, who needs that shit? Improvise is all I need.
Yes, and when they say improvise, they do literally mean, oh yeah, this plot point came up in the middle of session. Yeah. We're gonna build a session. We're gonna build the dungeon in session while players are role playing.
Yes.
This is literally down to the wire doing homework the second before it's due kind of shit.
But again, because their definition of like what constitutes a dungeon in this game is very open, you can do a lot with it. So it doesn't feel too restrictive or stressful to do the improvised dungeon.
Correct. They bring it up in the specific part where they bring up the...
Yeah, I mean, they talk about their, like, how to decide if to improvise or... pre-make it.
So one of the big things they talk about is... First questions first. Is the dungeon completely necessary to the narrative?
Is it important?
If the answer is yes, you should probably prepare it. If you didn't, that's okay, but you probably should prepare it. If it's not, you probably shouldn't waste the time preparing it. You can spend that doing other things. Just improvise it.
Especially too, because you can improvise so many other... Because you can improvise a lot of the like challenges, a lot of the conflicts, because you can improvise so many of them pretty easily, that makes the improvising the dungeon easier too, right? Because even you could, I think we mentioned this last time, you could have a fight in the dungeon that mechanically you as the GM do not have any stat blocks. You just do like a countdown clock for the fight.
Yes.
So that makes it a lot easier to improvise a dungeon if you can just be like, oh, the fight they run into, rather than dealing with stat blocks, I'm going to say they get jumped by a bunch of Sahuagins in the sewers, and I'm just going to countdown clock the fight with the fish people.
You had to get that one in, didn't you?
Sahuagins? Swaugans? Sagans?
Yep. Having fun?
Sea goblins.
He's having fun.
I am. I love Sahagans. Love those funny fish boys.
the way they talk about improvising dungeons is pretty simple. You have 3 real options that you can do to help you with your improvisation.
My man said, fuck the preparing session. You don't need that.
I mean, it's because, a lot of people know how to prepare them, and it does talk about preparing them more early on.
It does, yeah.
But the improvising thing, I think, is really important.
I will say, yes, I mean, most of the stuff in the preparing a dungeon bit is stuff you're mostly used to. There's a couple of things that the game mentions that you should do specifically for it. Like, for example, it mentions 2 danger clocks for the dungeon, which is somewhat specific to this game. But yeah, it's probably a lot of advice you've heard of already. So I'm mostly just ball busting.
Yeah.
Yes, the improvising bit.
Yes. So for improvisation, they recommend 3 different methods.
We have to mention, though, this is very important. Tables. Some great random tables for dungeon concept, focal element, the population, quirks of the dungeon. Love it. Bunch of D20 tables.
Yes.
They're great.
They're very good.
Anyway, continue.
Sorry. They give you 2 main methods. They specifically say that if you're improvising a dungeon, not to panic. Understand that you will almost certainly not be using the detailed exploration idea where, you're able to describe in expansive detail what's in each room, how the sconces glow a specific way. Don't worry about any of that shit. If it's an improvised dungeon, only give the players what they absolutely need and fill that out with flowery words.
Yeah, more.
And you're going to be doing that a lot.
Do more interlude scenes, as this game calls them.
Yes. So it's good. They say it's going to fall in between dungeon scenes and interlude scenes. Dungeon scenes are when in Fellowship of the Ring and Lord of the Rings, right? When they're running through Moria and they're trying to run down the stone stairs and the section in the middle falls out from underneath them, so they have to do the jump over the thing. Or when they're running away from the goblins, those are dungeon scenes. Those are scenes that are pushing the narrative that, cannot be done in broad swaths like the interludes, which, again, for those of you who don't remember, interlude scenes are the walking across the plains. They're the montages. They're the, when in some games where you have fast travel and they show you in the cart as the sun and moon go over your head. Those are interludes. And in, whenever your players are actually interacting with the narrative, those are called just standard scenes. Dungeon scenes are specifically the idea that you're getting something done and there is a crunch of some kind, be it time, security, anything like that. Those are dungeon scenes, specifically because they are kind of like conflict scenes that are taking place in the dungeon. Yes. The game goes on to state that the distinction of these 3 scenes don't really have anything to do with the importance of the dungeon. And I think a big one that they talk about is if something is going to be happening sort of off rip, as it were.
Off rip.
Don't be afraid to do whatever you think that you're going to need. Scale it back. Right? Give them what's, I said it before, and I'm kind of, broken record in this. Don't do more than what's necessary. And I'm sort of doing this because as someone who had to improvise dungeons and hellscapes, and they kept being like huge mega dungeons, and I, didn't really understand why my players kept feeling like it seemed like my players were bored, is because there's a lot of nothing going on. It's like you walk into a hallway, you walk into a room. What's in the room, GM? Nothing is in the room. You find a sandwich. You know what I mean? Just really useless shit. Whereas the shortest dungeon I had, which was 3 rooms, they were super invested in because there was no fat. It was all direct to the point, and they could really do things in that small space.
Yeah, it's like when you're doing the so the player, like, you're doing an improvised dungeon. The players walk into, let's say fictionally it's large. It's like, oh, it's a catacomb of a dwarven city. So it's like fictionally a large space. Fictionally being a large space and mechanically being a large space do not have to be the same thing. So when you're doing this scene and they're in these dwarven catacombs, you don't need to literally describe the hallway and describe the 2 doors, right? there's a hallway in front of you. One door on your right and one door on your left. Players, what do you do? Okay, we check the right door. Okay, you walk into a room. You find some chairs. You find some this. You find some that. You find some bones. Players, what do you do? I don't know. We look around the room. There is nothing in the room. No. You don't need to do all that shit, right? Because the players are going to get bored out of their minds and there's nothing there. Instead, what you say is you begin wandering the halls of the Dwarven catacombs, pushing open doors you see nearby, keeping your eye out for any like undead or something to attack you. You find bits and bobs in various rooms. In this room, you find a skeleton of this, and in this room, you find some clothing that looks like it may have been some sort of royalty garb. You describe the montage, the interlude vibe. And then you trim away all that boring exploration fat. And then when they get to a bit where you want them to like slow it down and focus, like, okay, you entered this room, you see X, Y, and Z. Now what do you do, right? That idea of like checking every room and poking every wall with a stick is it's very 70s D&D, and it's just not how we play anymore, nor do I think anyone really wants to play that way anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I think it's an archaic way of playing that I think it has its uses, and I think even nowadays it has a place. It's not to say that it's completely useless, but it for sure is one of those nostalgia driven, like, oh yeah, we're gonna do one of these. Okay.
Well, it's even like, I mean, if you even just think about it in the context of like a video game or whatever, right? You're playing Final Fantasy perhaps, and you're walking around a bunch of hallways, and you walk into a room and there's nothing in the room, and then you walk into the next room and there's one thing in the room, it's a potion, and you're like, okay, and you walk into the next room and there's nothing in the fucking room. It's like you're gonna get fucking annoyed at some point with the amount of like, there's nothing here, or there's nothing super exciting here, or now I'm lost because this area looks vaguely the same in most spots. Like it just doesn't. There's no reason to do any of that, especially in a tabletop context. So don't. And Fabula says don't.
Yes, it very specifically says don't.
Just don't.
Just don't.
Just don't for it. I don't know.
Yeah. The game can be a little, it can be a little harsh on you. It's kind of funny. Like, we'll get to it in a second.
I don't know if I'd say harsh.
Well, you're not harsh, but like stern.
Yeah, it's just no bullshit.
Yeah, well, so again, we were talking about the magic items where it says giving players even a +1 to their stat rolls is very powerful.
Yeah.
You cannot and should not give them more than two. Like, they basically fast and loose attunement slots and say that they cannot have 2 of those items at once.
Yeah.
You can technically have as many magic items in this game as you want, but you cannot have more than 2 of those specifically.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's looking at you as the GM and being like, cut that bullshit out.
Well, I think I think whoever, the person who wrote this was trying to, sort of save, what is their name? Nicola. Mr. Nicola Degobis? Degobis? We're gonna go with Degobis. Mr. Degobbis. I'm gonna say Degobis. Right?
It'd probably be Degobis, yeah.
Sure. Okay. Anyway, Mr. Degobis here.
There's also Emmanuel Galeto.
Oh, that was the person who signed it, so I don't know. Oh, wait. But that one person. Oh, no. Emmanuel Galeto's the author. Wait, what's the other name? Who's Nicola? What? Oh, that's the publisher. Ah, okay. Well, so Mr. Emmanuel then. Mr. Galeto. He was, I think the decision was, I'm going to save GMs from themselves and tell you, if you do X, Y, and Z, you will break the game, right? Like, I designed it this way, but I am also aware that this can be abused. Here is how you could abuse it. Don't do this. You will break your game. Like, he just sort of skipped the step of you having to find out the hard way, I think is the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's funny that it's very drill sergeant-esque.
A little bit. Some of that could also be translation, too.
It could be, yeah. Have you ever seen, this is a derail, Oh, bear with me.
Uh-huh.
There's a great video of these dudes. I believe they're Marines.
Uh-huh.
And there's this thing in the military called the water buffalo. It's just a big water container for when you're like out on deployment.
Okay.
And the guy was like, Sergeant said, I had to fill the water buffalo. I said, we didn't have a hose. Sergeant said, I don't give a fuck. So we figured it out, and they just turned the spigot upside down and just put the water as high as it would go. So it was just shooting like 10 feet in the air and raining down, and maybe 20% of it was actually getting into the fucking spigot hole. And he was like, we didn't have a hose. We had to figure it out. We did it.
I mean, that's certainly one way to do it. I somehow don't think that's what Sarge had in mind.
No, it's definitely not what Sarge had in mind, but like, he said figure it out and didn't give any instructions.
Fair enough.
This is what happens when you tell grunts to figure it out.
It's true.
They will figure it out.
It's true.
It just won't be the way you want or expect or like.
Yeah, you won't be happy about it, but you'll have water in the buffalo.
Yeah, you'll have water in your water buffalo. Yeah, I just like that.
It's good. It's good.
In this instance, Sarge told you how to figure it out.
Yeah,
like,
Sarge told you don't.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
They do have this really funny thing later on, or like right after this, called your dungeon archive.
Yes.
Which is to say, if you're a big fucking nerd and you really like designing dungeons in your free time, save those sons of bitches.
Yeah.
And use them when they might be important. And they also say if you like just looking at dungeons in your spare time, steal from other games and RPGs and just put them in Fabula and just do a little bit of this, listen that, and just to get to work what you want.
Which arguably is even nerdier.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But yes.
That's cool though, because of the way that Fabula works, right? You know, you could very easily take, you know, for example, Mad Mage dungeons.
Yes.
And I think pretty painlessly shift some things around, change some monsters around, obviously to fit the setting, and, you know, mechanics. And bada bing, bada boom, you have a dungeon right there.
Yeah.
And nothing about this tells me that this was accidental. Like,
no,
this almost certainly was done very on purpose. And I imagine that dungeons were something that they were thinking about from the beginning.
Well,
because
yeah, I think at some point along the way, Mr. Galetto was like, shit, I mean, dungeons are kind of a Final Fantasy staple. So how do I put them in the game that makes sense? You know?
Yeah.
But
and again, I feel like I have to stress, a lot of the mechanics feel like that they were built with the idea of prepping dungeons in mind. Like, even as is like the way that the classes are built in how that they have like a a point system rather than slots, for example, is more conducive to like longer trekking, right? It lets you think about things. It's not just, I've got 6 shots in the cylinder in my magazine.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it was designed with the dungeons in mind initially.
So maybe in mind is not the right word, right? Because that makes it seem like there was an intent
aware
to have, like,
of
dungeons
them?
be a popular thing. Yeah, have an awareness that like
It's gonna come up.
It's gonna come up. So they were built in such a way that was conducive to making dungeons feel seamless, or as seamless as they can be. Dungeons are never really seamless.
No, not 100%. But yeah, I could see that.
They do go into the preparing your dungeon, and I like this a lot. The steps are as follows. Step 1, think about the general look and mood of the dungeon. Is it a spooky ruin, lavish castle, perhaps a network of ancient tunnels? Number 2, sketch a rough map of the dungeon. This doesn't have to be pretty, but it does need to be functional. You're the only person that will use it, so make sure your notes are clear, especially if you plan on using the dungeon weeks or even months from now. If you're short on ideas, the internet is filled with awesome dungeon designs. There's nothing wrong with drawing inspiration from them. Number 3,
steal them
rewards.
Shits.
Yeah, steal them motherfuckers. See rewards on page 264. In your dungeon, these may be magic items, currency, or even inventory slots. try to avoid placing most of the rewards in the same room.
Inventory
you should encourage
points.
exploration. That was an interest. I assume they're going to like talk about it narratively as like a bag of holding or you know, like a little floating platform.
Or what?
To give you more inventory slots.
No, inventory points.
Points, yeah, sorry.
No.
Oh, yeah, to act as like a rest. Yeah.
No. I think what the idea is that place rewards in your dungeon, magic item currency, or inventory points. I think inventory points is like you find rations or you find potions in the dungeon. And then mechanically, because you spend inventory points to chug a potion in this game, fictionally, you find some potions in the dungeon. Mechanically, the GM says replenish 2 inventory points.
Yeah.
I think is the intention on that one.
Let's see.
Try to avoid placing most of the rewards in the same room. I mean, yeah, obviously.
Yeah. Place obstacles and threats, i.e. traps, puzzles, or hostile creatures in your dungeon, preferably so that they guard or prevent access to rewards. When you prepare an obstacle or threat, do not determine in advance how player characters might approach it. We talked about this in an earlier session. That's for them to decide.
I've talked about that a million times.
Yes, we've talked about it a lot. Avoid swarming the heroes with a large number of weak enemies. Instead, focus on 2 or 3 challenging encounters, see page 292. And finally, if the reward is an item, the creature guarding it might be using it in battle.
I particularly like it
5.
saying, like, even in a dungeon, 2 to 3 fights.
Yes. Yeah, don't go crazy. Rule 5. Think about 1 or 2 danger clocks appropriate to your dungeon. Their size and what will happen if they are filled. Will the heroes be ambushed? Is there a magical surveillance system? How will the tunnels be flooded by lava? I think this final one is the thing that's actually the most helpful here. Because for me, as I was reading it, I was like, oh god, 1 or 2 clocks per dungeon? Fuck me, that seems like a lot. But when you think about it in like the Indiana Jones style, the boulder rolling down the ramp, I think it feels a lot less daunting, you know?
Well, I mean, you don't even necessarily, it doesn't even necessarily, I mean, the heroes being ambushed, right? There's a thing in D&D where the players are trying to rest in the dungeon and the GM is like, okay, if they rest in the dungeon, there's patrolling monsters. So I have to determine if the patrolling monsters will run into them or not. How do I determine that randomly, right? If you just make a clock that says, you know, found by patrolling monsters, and then you make it a 4-step clock, and every time the players fuck up a roll that would potentially cause noise or something, you fill the clock, and then when it's filled, they get found. You know, like it just makes that sort of stuff easier.
Yes.
You know, the magical surveillance system, right? Can we avoid the magical surveillance system? In D&D, that's a pain in the ass because you have to determine like vision cones and invisible and true sight and blind sight and line of sight and stuff. You have to determine. In this, it's just like we try to sneak by. Oh, we failed the check. Okay, I'm gonna tick off one mark on the magical surveillance. So it's quite easy to come up with clocks for this kind of shit. Seems like it would be a lot. It's actually not that hard.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, we have rule number 6, which is determine the focal point of your dungeon, an antagonist, a precious artifact, or a vital piece of information, and choose its location. Most of the time, you will want to place this element far away from the entrance, but you might also want to make it relatively easy to reach. In this case, the rest of the dungeon will feature optional content. Hilariously, where my brain went with this is some of the dungeons in Legend of Zelda where you can literally see the chest the second you walk in, and then
right
you have to kind of go around,
and you have to figure out how to get to it.
Yeah, you have to loop. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, see, I think this is not really what they meant, but I kind of thought it would be funny, the idea that they walk into the first room of the dungeon and Excalibur is just sitting there on the floor. They just kind of pick it up and they're like, oh, okay. I guess we can leave now. And then just walk out because Excalibur's in the front room. I don't know. Again, not really what they meant, like, but yeah.
There's like a whole lich in the next room being like, "Oh, when they walk through that door, it's gonna be so sick." Where are they going?
Wait. Oh, what? Why are they like
Uh,
Who put Excalibur
maybe
in
I
that
shouldn't
room?
put it there.
Yelling at his evil minions.
Fucking brownies. After that, we kind of talked about this already. It was the Dungeon Archive. Josh brought up the tables, which are super cool. Dungeon concept.
Tables! We like you tables.
The dungeon concept is pretty simple. It's asking you where the dungeon is or what it is built inside of. So you have a Pyramid of Ziggurat, Tower of Sorcery, Network of Caves, Ancient Airship, Magitech Colossus, Lost City, etc., etc. Focal elements, what is in the dungeon? What are you looking for? A blessed weapon, apocalyptic mechanism, legendary monster, way to commune with an arcanum, the egg of a divine creature, access to a hidden city, etc. Population, so what's in the dungeon, not necessarily how many of them are in there, but what it is. So you have failed magical experiments, bandits or outlaws, dreams and nightmares, scholars and researchers, manifestations of elemental energies, etc. There's 20 of these for each. I'm not going to read all of them. And then you have your quirks, which could be some inspiration for your clocks. They have crumbling sections, surges of elemental magic, steam pipes and furnaces, moving corridors and staircases, beautiful decoration, warp space and time, and runes and magic circles, etc. After that, we talk about the rewards. Now, did this confuse you a little bit, Josh? It kind of like threw me for a loop for a second.
Rewards?
Yeah, the way that they talk about how to hand it out.
No.
Okay, well, so they talk about this piece right here, which is the handing out rewards. There are a few guidelines to follow when rewarding your players, regardless of how they obtain it. Strictly speaking, you have to worry about two things. The highest player character level in your group. Most of the time, all characters will be of the same level, but optional rules can change this. A number of characters in your group. You can then use a table to build an appropriate reward. Table indicates the average value you should be working with and zenith, the currency of the game. But you can go higher or lower for particular rich or minor findings. The table also indicates the suggested maximum value of any single item found at a given level range. You will find more information about rare items on the next page. So originally what confused me, right, is if you look at the first section, right, so highest PC level is 5 or higher.
Oh.
The maximum item value for one item you can find is 500. The average reward you are going to, each player will get if there's 2 NPCs is 500, 3 NPCs is 750,
PCs.
and 4 plus NPCs is 1000.
Or PC.
Yeah, 4 plus PCs. Yeah.
Said NPC.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
So the idea being that you can find one item with a maximum value of 500 means that for 2 PCs, you could potentially only find one item.
If it's a valuable 500
yeah, so
item, yeah.
That's what confused me. Is it
also says average.
My thought
it also says average reward.
Well, yes, average because you can go a little above or a little below,
yeah.
But these are the numbers that you want to strive to hit. Yeah, it just originally what confused me was that it was like the first one was 500, 2 PCs 500, 3 750, and then in the next one you have levels 10 up, maximum item value 1000, and then 2 PCs is 800.
Yeah.
So if 2 PCs are expected to get 800 each, right, roughly in terms of like equivalent value,
the 800
and then you
each
can have
or
an
800 between them.
To me, they don't seem to specify as far as I'm aware.
Okay. Well,
Okay. So it says so you're right. I guess it is divided between them because it does say it's generally better to split the reward budget into a variety of items, accessories, shields, armor, valuables, etc. So I guess for 2 PCs, you are finding 500 worth, but that still does create the question of the maximum item value for 10 plus is 1000.
yes.
2 PCs are only going to be getting 800, give or take.
Yes. What are you confused?
Why the maximum item value is more than what they are projected to get?
Well, because the maximum item value is talking about like if they find a sword that is worth 1000 zenith, that's the only thing they should find because it already exceeds. It's a singular item. So like maximum item value for one thing. So you found one weapon, but it's a really good weapon, so it's worth 1,000 zenny. Don't give them any other rewards. They've already blown their reward budget on this one item. But if there's 4 PCs and they find one 1,000 zenny sword, don't give them another high value item, but they got 800 more zenny to blow on other shit, or to get, for you to reward them.
Right. Okay. That makes more sense now.
Yeah.
After that, they talk about reward
I guess
frequency.
it should say maximum singular item value, I guess is probably, but it says the table also indicates the maximum value of any single item found at the given level range. So like if you make your own custom rare weapon and it's worth 2,000 zenny, do not give it to the level 10 players. That's too high.
Yeah.
That's how that breaks down.
Yes. After that, they talk about reward frequency. So it says, on average, the chart is based on the idea that a group will receive approximately one reward per session, as in every 4 or 5 hours of play. This is not a hard rule and more of a guideline. There will be some sessions in which characters do not receive rewards in any form, but instead develop connections or retrieve a powerful artifact. This is a little weird to me. I get the desire to put something on this, but I don't know how you feel about them getting shit every single session.
I don't know. I mean, it says it doesn't have to be every session. It's just saying like once a session's like an easy guideline to aim for. So like, I don't know. It doesn't bother me too terribly.
Okay.
It makes sense as just like a ballpark. That's it.
That's fair. The game therefore goes into how to deal with rewarding your players. And when I say how to deal with, how to give players potentially items that they might want, things that they will find useful. So they talk about learn what your players want. If you catch a player saying they'd like a specific item for their character, take notes. You can include that item in a future reward. Consider a survey or a wish list. They talk about this earlier in the game. Survey basically saying you ask the players what items they would like to find potentially, and then you get to pick from that list. And then wish list is you just ask them straight up, what items do you want? And I will sprinkle them throughout the game. How do you feel about that? I don't think we've actually talked about that.
But
the survey or wish list. Like, I know you sort of did it in your game, but like thoughts on it?
I mean, I did it. It works good. Players, give me a couple of magic items you would like to see appear. I would like X, Y, and Z. Okay, I will now put them in the game. That makes my life easy. I don't know.
All right, fair enough.
I see no reason not to do it. You lose
either.
Lose a little bit of the like, ooh, surprise, new toy, but like, whatever. It's not that. You don't lose that much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not opposed to it. I just kind of was curious what you thought. As someone who got this as a player, works for me. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, you're probably as a player going to have an idea of what kind of magical items you would want anyway, especially if you're playing something like D&D. Funny enough, in this game, it actually makes less sense because there's more of a like build your own magic item system as opposed to relying on bespoke magic items that the game has, like a big list. So it arguably makes more sense to do it in D&D than this game, which is kind of funny because this game suggests it and D&D doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, whatever. It's just D&D things.
Yes, fair enough. After that, tells you items that tell a story. When placing a given item amongst the rewards found by a character, consider what it says about the surrounding area and its inhabitants. Who brought the crystal rod to this shrine? Why did the ancient wyvern guard the ring with no apparent value? After that, you have the here and there. When an occasion arises and it doesn't feel forced, split your reward into smaller mini rewards tied to different places, creatures, or threats. The classic example would be a dungeon with several hidden treasures. To me, I thought about that immediately as like the infinity gems. You know, like the small things to build. Like it's making the Ultima weapon in fucking Kingdom Hearts. You need like the random bits here, some random bops here, just some shit that you gotta grind for, and that seems completely fucking useless, and then it turns into the strongest weapon in the game.
I don't think that's what they mean. That's an interpretation.
I mean, it is technically speaking on brand for Final Fantasy.
I mean, yes, it is.
And then after that, we have foreshadowing. This is a classic in JRPGs, something that you will either love or hate. What you could do is hand out rewards that will prove useful in future battles, such as a silver talon in a dungeon crawling with undead creatures that are vulnerable to its light damage. Adopting this method will surely make your sessions feel more video gamey, but it's a matter of taste. Discuss this choice with the rest of your group. I actually really like that. I like that there's sort of this over-the-table agreement that, like, hey, I'm not going to give you useless items. So think about the shit that you're getting, and don't be afraid to use it. That's why you're getting it. You know, don't be the Eli Wood in a given party.
No.
They go into something about rogues and their ability Soul Steal, which is basically allowing you to steal items from enemies. They do specifically mention that whatever the Soul Steal is used on, give players rewards as normal and just count that shit as extra. Don't let that eat into what their rewards should be, because that feels shitty.
I mean, yes, but also kind of funny.
Yes. The next section is designing rare items. It basically just goes through and explains some thoughts about how the magic items in the game are made and how you can sort of think about designing them. The first thing they say is to just choose one that you think, like, you know, choose one from the existing list. There is a lot. There's like 100 items in the game. In weapons alone, there's like about 100 items of different types. So you very easily could just take the Mjolnir hammer that's in the game and give that to a boss, and when you kill that boss, you get the Mjolnir. You could inversely just create an item, and there are some pretty neat rules about that. After that, it warns you what we were just talking about, which is to say, be careful with bonuses. Even innocuous looking +1 bonuses can make a huge difference because of this. Avoid granting characters too many rare items whose special ability enhances accuracy checks, magic checks, defense, or magic defense. In general, players should not have more than 2 of these equipped at any given time, etc., etc. Another interesting thing, I don't know if I necessarily agree with this. I understand what the thought behind it is, but again, I don't know if I agree, which is avoid copying existing spells or skills. When you create a quality for a rare item, a quality being any of its attributes, try to avoid copying the effects of a skill or spell that is unique to a specific class. Instead, look at which skills the player characters have acquired and give them items that synergize with those or that provide useful, if pricey, alternatives to the same skills that would otherwise be ineffective. I kind of disagree with this. I like the idea that you could give an Arcanist or any class, right, a magic item that gives them more levels towards specific skills that they otherwise could not reach by level 10. You know what I mean? So perfect example is, we'll just go into the classes section. Where are you? Character creation. Let's just go down to the where you is. Stand by, please.
You're saying like upgrade the skill level of something, like it normally would cap at 5, and then the magic item bumps it to 6.
So like the Dark Blade has 3 skills that can be leveled into more than once. You have Agony, a Painful Lesson, and Shadow Strike. So let's say you find, like, I don't know, whatever, the Sword of Darkness or whatever the fuck. And as part of it, you get 2 levels of Shadow Strike if you're a Dark Blade. I think that's cool, you know?
I don't think
and it makes you go,
what this means.
I mean, I'm not sure what else it would mean. It specifically says,
don't avoid copying the effects of a skill or a spell that is unique to a class. So what it's saying is, don't make a Dark Blade, or don't make your the Sword of Eternal Darkness that has the ability Shadow Strike, and then give it to the rogue character. That's what it's saying. Like, don't make an item that does something that already exists and then give it to somebody so that the class ability that was unique to a class is now no longer unique to the class because somebody else got it because of the sword they have or whatever.
Well, so yes, but here's the thing here is that there are no, as far as we're aware, there are no class restrictions, right? It's not like a Fury or a Weapon Master could not use the Sword of Infinite Darkness.
No.
You know, the GM sort of expects you to not use that because that's clearly the weapon for the Darkblade. There's no rule saying that you can't.
Right, but what it's saying is if you make the Sword of Infinite Darkness, you do a thing where its quality is when wielding this sword, you know, you have this ability where you can, I don't know, strike an enemy at range with a shadowy blade or whatever. But don't make it exactly the same as the Darkblade Shadow Strike ability. Or you could potentially put a qualifier that is, you know, it has this ability where it like launches a dark magic bolt. If a Darkblade wields it, it upgrades their Shadow Strike ability also. You do that too. But the idea,
that I can see, yeah.
But the idea is what they're saying is don't step on the other class's toes by handing out class abilities as items. You know, if the Wayfarer is really excited about their pet, and then you hand out the ring of magical companion summoning to one of the other players, now the Wayfarer's pet's not that cool because someone else has a ring that does the exact same thing. And it's also saying don't copy spells. So, for example, don't do that thing that D&D does all the time that drives me crazy, where you have the Circlet of Blasting, which just lets you cast a spell that already exists, aka Scorching Ray. Saying avoid doing that.
Yeah, no, that I get. I understand that can be kind of frustrating in D&D because there are so many spells and it just kind of gets wacky. Well, and it does feel a little bit less unique, which... Yes, it does, but I do think there is a use to that. I enjoy that thing.
It's just annoying if like the Guardian character gets to use the Shadow Strike ability because of some edgy sword they picked up when the Darkblade's like, yeah, but that's like my thing, you know?
Yeah, and I get that.
That's what it's talking about.
So this is where the roles are reversed. I think that's what they are implying, but it's not specifically saying that.
It says try to avoid copying the effects of a skill or a spell that is unique to a specific class. How is that not what the thing?
Because they're like,
how else
you and I can infer that, you know, don't give the Wayfarer a sword that lets it mimic Shadow Strike.
Yeah.
But again, the idea being that there's nothing stopping other players from just taking that ability, and you could write some sort of stipulation into it, but the game doesn't make any mention of that.
Right, there's nothing to stop the players from taking that ability, but the player has to invest. If the player wants to get the Darkblade Shadow Strike from leveling up, they have to invest time and plan their character around getting it, as opposed to just being handed a magic sword that lets them get, like... Essentially, what it's saying is, if a player wants the Shadow Strike ability because it would, you know, work for their build, dude, you know, don't just hand them a magic item that makes their build work all of a sudden because they're like, oh, I really need Shadow Strike. Instead, it's like, okay, well, you can invest character levels to get that thing if you want, but I'm not just handing it to you because that kind of, like, steps on the toes of another player. What it's saying is instead, and it literally says to do what you want, to do what you were saying before. Instead, look at skills the players have acquired and give them items that synergize with those skills or provide alternatives. So, like you were saying, you can pick up a sword that synergizes with the Darkblade, and it's like, oh, this sword upgrades the Shadow Strike ability. That's synergizing with something that a player already has, as opposed to just replacing it and giving it to somebody else. But I don't understand what other, like, interpretation of avoid copying the effects of a skill or spell. Like, what other interpretation would there be of that? What else? How else would you...
So that's what I was... The interpretation being is that it says, don't do it at all, right? Avoid doing it at all.
Avoid copying the
where we were talking about.
Avoid copying the effects of a skill or spell that is unique to a specific class.
Yes. So it says don't do that at all, but what we are talking about is doing it with stipulation.
No. How am I?
Like literally, yeah, because we were just talking about giving the Darkblade a sword that lets them get a stronger Shadow Strike. It's still mimicking an ability. It has a stipulation that you need to be a Darkblade for it, but it's still mimicking that thing.
Well, the stipulation would be you already have the skill, and it's not mimicking the skill, it is upgrading the skill. But it's not doing the same thing. Like, if you don't have the skill Shadow Strike, the sword does nothing. If you have the skill Shadow Strike, it upgrades it by 1 skill level. That's not mimicking it. That's enhancing an existing skill that you already have.
I suppose that's fair.
It's not creating the same thing. Now, is that exactly what they had in mind when they said synergizes well with their abilities? Maybe not. That's just one I thought of off the top of my head. You know, you could also give the Dark Knight a ring that anytime they lose health, they can spend mind points to regain some health, and that would synergize with Shadow Strike, and also because they lose health when they use Shadow Strike. So it's like, oh, that's a way to synergize, as opposed to straight up calling out the ability. You know. But it's not. It's just the niche. The point they're trying to make is the niche protection. Like, don't hand out the Arcanist bind and summon ability to everybody, because that would feel shitty. You know.
Yes. Well, that much I know. Yes.
That's really all they're getting at. And also maybe a little bit of don't just copy spells onto items, because that's kind of boring, I'm sure is also maybe part of their train of thought there. I know that's part of my train of thought. The only problem I have with this bit of advice is that sometimes it's a little hard. Like, you're probably going to do it by accident. That's the only thing.
Yes.
Like, there's a strong chance that you make an ability that is just a spell that's in the game already and you just didn't know it exists. That's probably going to happen. But, you know, whatever.
Fair enough. After that, we do have the they go into the designing of rare items.
Yeah.
For weapons specifically, and this pretty much goes across all of them, so I think I'm just going to skip. We're going to do the weapons one and just kind of jump around a little bit. You have step 1. Choose an existing basic weapon from the list on pages 130 through 131. Ignore the unarmed, improvised, or improvised ranged weapons. By default, weapons deal physical damage. If you want your weapon to deal damage of another type, air, bolt, dark, earth, fire, ice, light, poison, etc., increase its cost by 100 zenny. So this is what they were talking about before when they were talking about something with a maximum item cost or value. It's that when you make these items, they are giving you numbers, a value to tack onto it based on the things it can do. You may need to apply any of the following changes. If the weapon is a two-handed weapon, you may turn it into a one-handed weapon. If you do so, reduce its damage by 4. If it's one-handed but is not a brawling, dagger, or thrown weapon, you can turn it into a two-hand, increase its damage by 4. You can add a +1 to the weapon's accuracy, which would increase its cost by 100 zenny. You cannot add this bonus if it's already at a +1 or higher. You can increase the weapon's damage by 4 if you do increase it by 200 zenny. So I like this a lot. You can take a two-handed weapon, drop it into a one-handed weapon, and maintain its damage for a higher price. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, the designing system is pretty good. Also, there's a little pop-out section before the designing system that mentions, tells you how to, go to an NPC blacksmith and add a quality to a weapon or replace a quality on a weapon. So you can sort of customize and how to price that out and everything. So there's a lot of build, mix and match, designy stuff with the equipment, with the rare items. There's not a lot of basic equipment, and there's actually not even that many rare items in this game. But with this building system, you can make a bazillion jillion. So there's also, there's also the custom weapons in the high fantasy book that you can add in there too, which gives you more building options.
And the tech fantasy book, and the book that's coming out soon.
Well, I don't know.
There's plenty of items.
I don't know if there's any. I don't know if there's custom building stuff in the Tech Fantasy, but I know there is one in the High Magic.
There is, insofar as the the materia of the game, the Technospheres.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, they thought of it. The Technospheres thing, actually, small aside, the Technospheres thing is cool. I don't know if I would unless, obviously if you're playing the Tech Fantasy one, I would say go for it because it adds a lot. But it does make the game a little weirdly noodly because it only, if you're using them, you can only take 3 classes, and the rest of your levels go towards your Technospheres, which is, again, to say your materia.
Oh yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, it's a cool idea, but the game even says, like, if you're not doing this specific thing,
don't commit to it.
Don't commit to it, and if you do commit to it, everyone has to agree to commit to it, or else it gets really weird for the GM.
See,
and yeah, just based on what I read, yeah, it gets a little noodly for sure.
Makes sense.
Let's see, where was I? Oh, yeah, after this is just
attributes.
That's right.
That's the last little bit.
You may modify the attributes required by the accuracy check, which is to say what attributes are used for the check itself, being your willpower, insight, I believe, what is it, strength, and
might, agility, willpower, insight, I think.
Yeah, might, agility, willpower, and insight, yeah.
Something like that.
So you can swap those around. Accuracy checks that require a single attribute are worth 50 more, which is to say, spell books and staffs are, let's say, like
double
books
insight.
Are insight plus insight, staffs are willpower plus willpower. So to do that, it costs 50 more.
All right, I was one off. Dexterity, insight, might, willpower.
So that's fair because usually the agility is the swap out word.
Yes, the swap out for dex. Yeah.
Yeah. Finally, you may give the weapon a single quality as chosen from the list on the right or below if you're reading from PDF, or use the sample abilities as a guideline to come up with a custom effect. This increases the final cost of the item by the variable amount, which is to say the qualities themselves come with an innate amount. So anti-status, which is to say you are immune to a single status effect, is plus 500. Resistance, which is, halves damage to a single damage type, is plus 700. I think that's kind of weird. That one, I mean, I guess it's because it's just straight up damage that it costs more, but I thought that was a little strange. Either way, the lowest price on this is 500, the highest being 2,000. Well, that being perfect health, and you are immune to all status effects.
That's of the defensive ones. The offensive magical is only plus 100.
Oh yeah, true. For offensive, it's 100, and then it also maxes out at 2,000. No, it's whatever. After that, we get 10 pages of magic items.
A bunch of example magic items. Rare items.
Yeah. For armor, it's the same thing. Armor and shields. The above costs also apply, and then it has its own little set of qualities. And then you get another 3 pages of that. Then you get accessories. Surprise.
Another system for custom.
Yeah.
Basically, they each have their own little build your own system for the accessories, the defensive items, the offensive items.
Yes.
Long story short.
After that, we get the artifacts, which are, the legendary items. There's not many of those. They're these are built as samples, and the game sort of expects you to build your own, and there's...
and these aren't really mechanical. They have a mechanical effect, generally, but the idea of these artifacts is not... It's not like a legendary sword in D&D where it gives you a bunch of crazy, it's a +3, and as a bonus action you could do this, and as an action you could do that. The idea is that they're like, the artifact is narratively, it's the main item that you're going after in the game in some fashion, and so it has narrative weight to it, and its effect might not even be mechanical at all. For example, like the sword Soul Rend is like this weird sword that you can't use as a regular sword because it doesn't have an edge, but it can like cut souls out of the life stream, which mechanically means nothing, but fictionally could be really relevant depending on, you know, the story going on with your game or whatever.
Yes.
So artifacts are not what you think of if you've played D&D and you know what an artifact is in D&D. They are not that at all.
Yeah, I mean, took the words right out of my mouth on that one. That's everything I was going to say.
Well, yeah.
All good. After that, we are finally at the designing battles section, which, I mean, this sort of goes into the designing NPCs. I'm not sure if we'll get to all that. Some basic stuff they talk about, relevant battles. It takes place when two sides are at odds and resort to violence in order to achieve their goals. Battles should be meaningful. They should build on what has previously happened in the story and add new interesting characters or plot elements to move things forward. So a big thing here, no random encounters that are battles. You can have them as the sort of clock-based stuff, the ability check-based stuff, but if you're going to put NPCs on the board, like enemy character tokens, it's got to be important.
No, I don't think it's saying no random encounters. I think it's just saying keep things relevant, but that doesn't mean you necessarily have to do no random encounters at all.
Well, I'm thinking about this in terms of the conflict scenes, right? Where it says like conflict scenes are meant to be important things. If you're going to have like all fights are not conflict scenes, I think that sort of reinforces the idea that
I'm pretty sure it talks about random encounters somewhere though.
No. So you can have random encounters, but a battle, to me, seems like they're talking about specifically conflict scenes.
Yeah, but
in which case the game is pretty adamant to say, don't use those.
I don't think it is actually. I'm pretty sure it says you can do like your standard usual random encounter stuff. I don't remember
things that aren't conflict scenes.
No, I don't think it makes any particular distinction about that.
It does. Hold on. Yeah, go to scenes.
Like I know it says. I know. Like yes, like it's saying relevant battles is in. Don't just throw stuff in willy-nilly for the sake of it. Like make battles sort of narratively relevant. When a fight happens, it should be worth it. But it does also mention having, you could have 3 fights in a day, for example. It's like one of those might be a little less, might be kind of a random encounter or something close to it. You're doing 3 in a day.
I don't know. To me, that didn't read as a random encounter. It's like if you're in the dungeon, you're fighting monsters that are in front of your loot. Not necessarily like...
That's a random encounter, though.
You're fighting... Is it? Like...
Yeah. Stroll into the room. We didn't know there were enemies here. Oh shit, there's enemies here. We're in a fight now. Counts. It's not a random encounter in the sense that I literally rolled on a table, but it's essentially a random encounter. It's not like, yes, I as the GM did not randomly roll on a table per se. Or maybe I did. In that situation, you could also randomly roll on a table. Depending.
I suppose.
I think it's not saying no random encounters. It's just saying no fluff fights. Like, don't have a fight just for the sake of having a fight. Like, do something with it. Like, do it for a purpose. But I would argue that if you're traveling through the spooky evil woods and you have the characters get jumped by a random encounter, which is to say like some spooky ghost bears or whatever attack them in the middle of the night, that the purpose of that is to reinforce the place that they are in and reinforce the story of the setting. So it's not like a fluff encounter because it's not totally meaningless, but it's a random encounter in the sense that the players weren't necessarily expecting or planning on it.
Yeah, okay, so fair enough. That's the distinction we're making. Do not design a battle for overland travel when you get attacked by goblins. Let that be a skill check based thing. Can we at least agree on that?
I'm not gonna say no. I'm not gonna say never on that. So sort of yeah, but sort of no.
Works for me. They talk about characters being people, not numbers. Characters are more than their stats. They have emotions, a personality, their own lives and goals. When they fight, they do so for a reason. Even the ones that aren't the focus of your story should be treated as more than disposable, faceless pawns. In not so many words, sometimes people will just fucking run away if they're getting their ass kicked. You know, not every NPC is stupid enough to fight to the death. It doesn't always have to be a death match.
Don't run it straight up like a video game is really what it's getting at.
Yes. Don't run it like a video game. Despite how video gamey the game is, it's fine. More than the sum of its parts, there are a variety of elements that can alter threats posed by a situation. The options available for I don't know why I almost broke into like a Russian accent there. The options available for player characters, for instance, or the particular synergy between two monsters. Once you add the environment, the whim of the dice, and the occasional use of ritual magic into the mix, you can see that there's no way to foresee the outcome of battle, and that's okay. Being the GM has nothing to do with being in control, but rather your ability to react to unexpected situations. Battles are just like that. Sometimes things get a little weird, or the heroes will steamroll their foe. Don't sweat it too much. After that, we have balance. While the advice in the coming pages is geared towards building a somewhat balanced challenge, remember that there's nothing wrong with an easy battle every once in a while or the occasional super hard boss fight. Just don't make those the norm or they'll lose their charm. More importantly, respect the player's expectations and what you discussed during Session 0, and design battles in accordance with what you'd agreed upon in terms of challenge and complexity. Finally, take your time. This is a really important one, I think. When the heroes decide to fight an enemy for which you didn't have any combat stats ready, it's perfectly okay to pause the game and take your time to design those creatures. The rules on page 302 have been designed specifically to make this process as smooth and as fast as possible. Once you have familiarized with them, creating new adversaries will only take a few minutes. There's also always the bestiary, of course. That's really cool. The fact that it like levels with you and says, hey, look, solid chance that this is a thing that could pop up. Don't sweat it. Shit happens. How many battles? This sort of talks about how many battles are going to be assumed in between rests, not necessarily full rests, but just rests for when your players will burn their inventory points.
Yeah, I mean, two things. One, I like the numbers on this. 3 easy battles, 2 normal battles, and 2 normal battles, or 1 normal and 1 easy, or 1 hard battle. Like that's just very like, if you're gonna have a hard fight, just do the 1 for the day. If you're gonna have some easy fights, you can do like 3 or 2. Bada bing, bada boom. Nice and simple. We don't need to get too fancy with it. Just appreciate that we didn't have to get too fancy with it. And then it gives you, after that, a very simple, if the enemy's level is lower than the party level, they're probably too weak. If they're within 5 levels of the party level, they should be good. If they're within 10 levels of the party level, there's going to be a challenge. If they're 11 plus levels, they're probably too strong. Basically, coming up with like encounter math is fucking brain dead easy in this game, which, thank Christ.
Yeah, seriously.
Side note, so again, because I feel like we need to bring it up, combat in this game is like, mechanically, not a lot going on. TBH. Basically, you roll initiative, and it's group initiative. So everyone on your team rolls. If somebody rolls high, then you're good to go. Player team goes first, and you decide who goes, and then NPCs go, and then player go, and then NPC go, and then player go, and so on and so forth, until you run out. The thing that's fun about that is, obviously, round 1, you have player A, player B, and then player C go, and then round 2, you go, actually, player C, you go first, so you could do X, Y, and Z, and then I'll go second, player A, so you can mix it up. And then it also mentions, obviously, if the enemies if there's more, so if there's 3 players and 5 enemies, and you go player, NPC, the last 2 enemies just go one after the other, which does mean, and the game does mention, if you add more enemies on one side than the other, they can just overwhelm and dogpile the shit out of somebody. So, be aware of that. If you have 3 players and 6 or 7 Gamooks, those Gamooks could just beat the dog shit out of your players when the last 3 get to go in a row and just, bully the fighter into the dirt.
Yes, and I think something really interesting to bring up is that the game, unless specified otherwise, each player only has 1 action.
Yeah, so the action economy is literally just, you have a minor action, which is to say, like, pick something up off the ground or toss something or like open a door or like pull a lever, right? Basic shit. And then you have an action, and it's like with your action, there's a list of actions, attack, equipment, guard, hinder. So there are a couple of like bespoke mechanical actions, but the important thing to do is your singular action. The thing that's important about combat with this game is your singular action should cover, because the GM is, the game tells the GM to try and not just design a slugfest all the time. So your singular action as a player should be reacting to it not being a slugfest all the time, which is why one of your actions is called objective, which is where you try to push the objective of the fight, whatever that might be. Stop the ritual, open the door, protect the person, whatever. So it's like very simple, straightforward handling the combat. That being said, if the GM just makes the slight a slugfest, it might get boring. So, try to also be aware of that.
Yeah, be aware that that's absolutely a thing that can happen. That's
a problem that I was thinking about when I was looking at this game, and I was like, yeah, that's something to definitely be somewhat concerned about.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, like that's kind of like, that's the vibe. Like your action is like, I cast a spell, I do an attack, I hold the door if they're trying to push through, something like that. I react to whatever the bad situation is. You can also study enemies. Did you notice the study action?
Yes.
But that was pretty fun. If you roll a 16 plus, literally everything someone could possibly know about the enemy. And I think somewhere one of the classes has an ability that's like you could just learn the monster stats and shit. Just straight up.
Yes, the lore master has that.
Yeah. So that's a thing. There's also some teamwork rules, some group check stuff, which again, not worth going into great detail, but you have a supporting characters, you have the leader character, everybody helps the leader. I think the thing where basically I think combat will get interesting if you as the GM can really throw in countdown clocks and scenarios that aren't just slug it out. I mean, every once in a while you'll slug it out, obviously. But yeah, the combat is good in that it can be straightforward, but it is also bad in that it can be really straightforward. So be aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for, something that like what Lancer has given you, what your super crunchy, you can, I do this thing which goes with this thing that goes with this thing that goes with this thing.
Yeah, you're not doing sick number combos in Fabula. You're doing you're doing sick fictional team attacks.
Yeah, I was about to say, that ain't it, cheap. I mean,
no.
I'm going to be remiss because I know Paladin will say something about this if I don't bring it up.
Uh-huh.
There is an amount of power of like min-maxing you can do with this game.
A little bit.
There are certain quirk combinations, quirks being like, they're sort of like racial feats. There are things that you can take at level 1 that gives you certain boons or debuffs or what have you.
Those are not base rules though.
They are not base rules, no. They start in high fantasy and they continue from there. You can use those to get, for example, extra actions if you take the Queen's Guard ability or have some cool synergy stuff.
Yeah.
They are a possibility, but yeah, they're not base rules.
It's not the focus. And it's also, if you're trying to like power build in this game for the sake of combat, you're kind of missing the point. Also, if the GM is running the game correctly, you trying to power build to be a combat monster is not really going to be that satisfying, because you being a combat monster is only going to be a thing every once in a while. You know, like, it's not like D&D where if you're a combat monster, you get to flex your sick math skills every time you get in a fight, because the fights are often straightforward and are going to be involved around different objectives. Because you can do a ton of damage in a turn might not matter. That doesn't help you close the demon portal any faster. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. I wanted to bring up combat because I realized we needed, and I was like, we need to address it at some point.
Yeah. There is some creating a monster stuff that I think I
fucking love these rules.
Okay, do you want to hit it real quick then? Because we are coming up on almost 2.5 hours.
Look, all right. There's 3 types of monsters, all right? You have soldier enemies, elites, and champions. The bestiary has all the example creatures in the bestiary are soldier type enemies, and they have levels. So a level 10 monster, should be fighting a level 10 to 15 party. That's what the levels are for. And then soldier is like your mooks, your guys, your goons, your goobers, whatever, right? They're your basic guys. If you're doing an easy battle, the game says the number of soldier enemies should be roughly equal to the number of player characters, -1. So if you have 4 player characters, then an easy fight would be 3 soldiers. A normal fight would be an equal number, so 4 and 4. And a hard fight would be equal to the player characters +1. So 5 soldiers and 4 player characters is a tough fight. Within the level range, consider the level range as 2, obviously. If you want to upgrade the monsters to elites or champions, the math is real simple, but effective. So, for the elite, you double the hit points, they gain a skill. There's a big list of NPC skills that are special to the NPCs, which is fun. I like that it's not just a copy pasta list of player skills, although you can, of course, steal player skills too. And then the big thing is elite monsters get 2 turns per round. So they get to go twice, which is a thing that I always say D&D should do, but doesn't. And also their initiative...
Lancer does that.
Yeah. Also, their initiative score increases by 2, so they're more likely to go first. And then champions replace a number of soldiers. So if you want a champion, like a single monster, but you don't want it to be like a super hard fight, you want like an average fight, but you want a single monster, and let's say you have 4 players. So the champion creature replaces 4 soldiers' creatures worth of stats. So multiply the creature's maximum hit points by the number of soldiers it's replacing. So if it has 20 HP and it's replacing 4 soldiers, 20 times 4, so it has 80 HP. Double the creature's mind points. It gains a number of additional skills equal to the soldiers it's replacing. So in this case, 4. It would get 4 skills. And it gets a number of turns equal to the number of soldiers it's replacing. So it would get 4 skills and 4 turns. Right? So it's 1 monster, and it should be kind of an average fight, but it gets to go 4 times and has a bunch of more skills. And it gets a +1 to its initiative score for every soldier it replaced, so +4 to its initiative. Beautiful way. I just love the way they work this idea out. It's like, okay, I have my base enemy and then upgrading to the better enemies. How do you do that? Okay, well, if you just take the math of the basic enemy and then just multiply it upward, that's how you make your harder enemies. Fucking beautiful math. Whoever nailed that one, genius. Fucking nailed it, Chief.
It's very good.
It's easy to understand. It works great mathematically and easy to understand. Nailed it. Fabulous. Love it. God tier. They also talk about levels and stuff a little bit, like you can adjust levels to sort of. So when designing a battle involving 3 level 10 PCs, 2 level 10 soldiers would make for an easy encounter, while a level 20 champion replacing 4 soldiers would be feasible but really hard, right? So you can adjust the math dials. Anything between those 2 extremes would be fair game, with a battle against 3 level 15 soldiers being the most average. It also says try to keep fights to around 3 to 4 rounds. I'm not the kind of person who would necessarily stress that, but I like that they mention it. And then it gives some advice on handling damage types, which is basically just saying, if this monster is immune to all of the damage that your players can deal, be aware of that. If this monster is weak to everything your players deal, they're gonna clown on it. You know. Also, be clear, like with the resistance and vulnerabilities and the absorption, right? If you hit the fire elemental with fire and it heals it, tell the players it's healed. They also mentioned charged attacks, which is cool, where they say if an enemy is about to use a powerful attack, the kind that the player's character should guard against, guard being an action you could do, describe them charging energy at the start of the round, only to unleash the attack later so the group knows. Love that. Another thing that I have said D&D should do, sort of like wind up attacks.
Yeah.
They have some advice on how to do swarms. Not crazy about it. They basically say take all the monsters and slam them into one token. That's it. Not crazy about the way they handle the swarms, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, pretty basic.
Yeah. There's a whole big chunk on like adding environmental hazards and obstacles and gimmicks and reinforcements to the fights, stuff to like spruce the fight up. And then it talks about boss battles. It tells you, you know, how to design them boss battle wise, where it's like, you know, how many soldiers, or if you want to use a champion and elites and what you should do the math there. Make sure to use your Ultima points. And then it also says for boss battles, something that I like really idea is multiple parts. Did you read this?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So where it's like the limbs of the enemy. So the example it gives is a giant crab with a central body could be champion 2, and then his 2 pincers are 2 separate soldiers. So they can attack the pincers and disarm him, Lamau. And then his central body is a singular champion. So it's like fictionally fighting one creature, but mechanically fighting multiple creatures. I thought that was a very fun way to break that up. I don't know exactly. I'd have to think about how I'd want to use that, but it's cool. They, of course, also mentioned like multiple phases. But then one that's... they also give you, much like designing the rare items, there's a whole menu. For the sake of time, I won't go through it, but there's a whole menu of how to design NPCs and, you know, their stat blocks that is very similar to how to design the rare items. That again, quick, good, dirty, does the job, bing, bang, boom. And then it goes through the the bestiarian types. It gives you, or no, sorry, it goes through the skills you could give them and like special shit you can give them. And then gives you, the sample boss design. Did you read that? Or that Angela the Fire Mage? Okay. The sample boss design is really, it basically, they go through the system they told you of how to make like a monster, and they walk you through it very slowly, step by step, and make like a cool fire mage character, and then give you a stat block for her at the end. That's really, if you want to see the system like in action and get some fun ideas off of it, very cool idea. There's actually 2 of them. There's Angela and the Thorn Shark, which is a big flying fish.
The giant fucking battleship shark.
Yeah.
I love that thing.
Yeah, big battleship shark. And then it lists out everything in the bestiary, which there's nothing crazy. They have basic attacks, they have their HP, their stats, their resistances, so on and so forth, their defense and magic defense, which is AC essentially, basic attacks, spells. The one thing that's cool about the sort of unique thing with monsters in this game is, well, actually, they arguably have 2 unique things. They have special abilities, and then they have like a special trait. Or special rules, they're called. They have other actions and special rules. That's how they phrase it. So like, there's this thing called the dancing, there's this one works. The Arcane Lantern, and it has an action called Mana Transfer. And it says the Arcane Lantern may use an action to spend 10 mind points to choose another creature it can see. That creature receives an equal amount of mind points. And it says special rules construct the lantern is immune to poison. Those are those 2 bits you can kind of spice things up with. But the one enemy I saw in here that had a really cool thing that I don't think they showed on anything but this one plant monster was the like special swallow ability. Did you see that?
Yes, I do think I know what you're talking about.
The big thorn mouth, whatever. I'm trying to find it. Of course, now I can't find it as I'm furiously scrolling.
Yes, oh god, fucking.
Where is he? The dragon trap. So the dragon trap has an attack where basically he swallows you, and then the swallowed person, you start a 4-stage clock, and the swallowed person basically can fight their way out, or just basic attack it. But the idea of if they're hit, they're swallowed. A swallowed creature will suffer minor physical damage at the beginning of each of the turns, and the person inside can perform no other actions except for the objective action with the goal of freeing themselves. And now swallowing is like nothing too crazy in terms of like monsters, like D&D has swallow abilities too, but the fact that in the stat block they put a specific ability that requires a countdown clock to deal with it and stuff is a good primer to be like, hey, this is the kind of shit you can put on your monsters. Don't just make them attack, make them start an event, make them do a big thing you have to like deal with fictionally or otherwise, shit like that. Big fan of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I like that the monsters are pretty simple and straightforward, but they have fun little tidbits sprinkled throughout. Did you read The Cockatrice by any chance?
I honestly, I read all of these months ago when I first read it, but...
The Cockatrice, the petrifying peck, right? It attacks you. Each target hit by this attack suffers the slow condition. If a target is already slow, they must succeed on a difficulty level 10 might plus willpower check, or be turned to stone. They're petrified. Healing a petrified creature is an adventure in and of itself.
Hey, yo.
Yeah. They're straight up like, there's no greater resto, bad boy. You gotta figure this shit out.
Huh.
Yeah. So like stuff like that, I love that kind of shit because it takes a singular little dorky monster who, it's a cockatrice. You've seen a million of them. You've killed a million of them in D&D. You might not think anything of it. All of a sudden, there's this big story about, Jim got fucking petrified and we had to drag him out of the woods and then we had to find the cockatrice and get its fucking blood and shit, Like, just adds a whole new layer.
Yeah.
So, the point I'm getting at being the monsters, the bestiary, on first glance, might not seem very exciting in this game, but there's little tidbits you can grab onto and make some really cool shit with if you just know where know what to look for and like extrapolate a little bit, basically. Also, I lied, by the way. The studying the NPC thing I was talking about, anyone could do that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, studying a non-player character. If you want to know more about an NPC profile, perform an insight plus insight check during a conflict scene. The study action is what you're looking for. The game master will reveal the corresponding info. If you get a 10 plus, you know its rank, species, max HP, max MP. You get a 13 plus, all of the above, plus traits, attributes, defense, and affinities. If you get a 16 plus, all of the above, plus basic attacks and spells. So if you want to take the time to study the monster, you can like learn all this shit. Which I think is something that you've often asked for.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So basically, you're going to run this game and you're looking over the NPC stuff. Read carefully and think about it carefully and look at the examples, because the examples tell you a lot about how the designer thinks you should handle this game. And I think I think also stuff like the fact that the cockatrice can petrify you and there's no easy way to get rid of it reinforces that concept of no fight. Like, fights shouldn't just be random, meaningless nonsense, right? Fighting a cockatrice is a big deal because the threat of being petrified is a problem. You know, it reinforces that idea of don't just do random gobbledygook fights for no particular reason.
Yeah.
Which is something I often talk about. And that's the end of the book.
Yeah, that is it.
Kind of funny.
I'm fucking tired, dog.
It ends on it ends on the bestiary, which is kind of funny because I don't know. I mean, I guess where else would you put it? But I don't know. It ends it ends on the designing and the sample boss design, which feels like not necessarily an ending chapter, but whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know, random observation. But yes, you personally, you should read the sample boss design. Because they mentioned a couple of cool ideas in there that I'm like, oh, I might not have considered that unless they brought it up that way.
I will definitely have to. I think I want to run a one shot of this game in the next couple months.
Yeah, I mean, game cool. Like,
game very cool.
There's lots of stuff in there. And when I was first reading it, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, like I'd play this. Like, this is interesting. And then when I got to a lot of the like NPC and GM section stuff and the dungeon stuff, I was like, oh, I'd actually want to run this. Which is good, because I feel like it's been a while. Like, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I don't always read a game and think I want to run it right away, you know?
Yeah. All right, motherfucker. I was gonna say, I guess that is your closing notes.
Yes.
Give us a like or something on social media, please. Appreciate you.
Or something.
Haven't done the blue sky thing yet because I got sick and then had to go to a wedding, but we're working on it.
I told you not to promise that.
And like I said, I never said quote me on it. I just said I think we're gonna try. I was gonna shoot for it.
I never said quote me on it. It doesn't matter if you say quote me on it. You said it on the internet. You might as well have engraved it on your forehead. It's the internet.
We're working on it.
Never goes away. Internet always remembers.
It does. Yeah. That's been us. Peace, motherfuckers.